Xianxia's pace was calm and composed, and it didn't make a single sound. But every single step of his carried a heavy and oppressive force. As they looked at this young and calm young man, as they gazed at his figure that moved unhurriedly towards the arena, the clamorous noise in the surroundings actually fell gradually. When Xianxia stepped foot onto the arena, the surroundings were already perfectly silent to the point a dropping needle could be heard. This sort of atmosphere was something no one had expected. It was deathly silent, solemn, and even carried an oppressive aura. Interesting. His vital energy has actually soundlessly affected the crowd's state of mind. This isn't something an ordinary figure can accomplish. In the extreme distance, Gu Yuten's eyes suddenly flashed with a strand of bright light, and he was extremely surprised. He'd heard that Xianxia had appeared in the Martial Emperor domain, so he came over and just happened to witness this scene. This is martial Dao will. Only those that are completely concentrated in battle would be able to create this sort of influence that was like a force. This also proves that this Xianxia's martial Dao will is so formidable that it's unimaginable. Luo Zifeng had rushed over here a long time ago, and he'd witnessed the entire process of the changes that occurred since Xianxia arrived at the arena. As he spoke, his voice couldn't help but carry a wisp of emotion. Even at their level, this sort of martial Dao will was extremely rare. Now that it had appeared on a young man at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm, he couldn't help but exclaim with admiration. One just advanced into the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm. One has just advanced into the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm. I wonder exactly who will prevail in this battle. Gu Yutong pondered deeply before he spoke, and his gaze was fixed on the distant training arena. I look forward to it as well. Luo Zifeng smiled. Even though Liang Bing has taken him into the Liang clan, I have to try fighting for him. My Luo clan really lacks young men like this. Gu Yutong's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this. Yet he didn't say anything further. After Xianxia stepped foot on the arena, the surrounding spectators finally seemed as if they'd awoken from a dream. They awoke from a deathly silent atmosphere, and the gazes they shot at Xianxia changed greatly along with this. They knew very well that their minds had obviously been soundlessly affected by an aura, and it caused them to be only able to return to their senses now. Moreover, this aura obviously came from Xianxia. On the arena, Wanchuan had similarly noticed this scene, and his gaze was deep and flickered indeterminately. He chuckled when Xianxia stood facing him far away on the arena. What? Those two assistants that helped you sign IOUs didn't come with you? He was naturally speaking of Liang Zhen and Liang Liang. The surrounding crowd recalled what they'd seen and heard last month when they heard Wanchuan, and they recalled the pair of weirdos that had infuriated Wanfeng. All of them couldn't help but burst into laughter, and the atmosphere instantly became much more relaxed. But when Xianxia heard this, his gaze turned cold instead because he instantly understood that Wanchuan probably knew that Liang Zhen and Liang Liang had suffered heavy injuries and were almost crippled. Moreover, the culprit was their clan. Unfortunately, they left too swiftly after collecting the debt. Otherwise, the Liang clan would have another 2 more idiots. Wanchuan revealed a ghastly smile while he revealed a mouthful of snow-white and sharp teeth. But it's fine. Crippling you will be sufficient to take revenge for my younger brother. Big brother, how can you let him off so lightly? Cripple him first, and then I'll get even with him in the outside world. I want him to know how living is worse than death after he offended me. Wanfeng. Wanchuan's voice hadn't finished resounding in the air when someone let out a grim shout from the crowd. That person had a handsome yet warped face, and his gaze bluntly revealed resentment. It was exactly Wanfeng. Everyone was amused and surprised when they saw him. They were amused because he was infuriated to the point his soul suffered a heavy injury and was forced to leave that day, and it was too humiliating. They were surprised because they never expected that he would actually be so resentful towards Xianxia and seemed to be unwilling to stop until he killed Xianxia. Idiot! Xianxia's reaction towards such cries was similarly simple, and he didn't even turn around as he lightly spat out a word. His voice wasn't loud, yet everyone present could hear it clearly. Wanfeng's expression turned livid, and he was angered to the point of gnashing his teeth as he pointed at Xianxia and said resentfully, "Kid, Just you wait. There's no need to wait. I'll annihilate him right now. On the arena, Wanchuan's face sank as well, and he let out an icy cold and explosive shout. His figure moved out ferociously while his right arm tore through the sky, and it was like a dark dragon that shot out water as it shot out a copious amount of force from his palm. This palm force actually contained an extremely violent energy that was like the eye of a storm. Everywhere it passed, space was actually shaken to the point of shattering inch by inch, and it emanated an ear-piercing sonic boom. The clan's dark spirit tide palm. Someone exclaimed with shock as he'd recognized this immortal art. It was one of the inheritances of the clan that contained the laws of water. Once it was executed, it was like the birth and destruction of a tide, and it swept out like 1,000 waves with might that could split rivers and destroy everything in its path. Bang! The might of his palm surged over, yet Xianxia's expression remained unchanged when he sensed the force within it. He casually swung his hand, causing a strand of sword chi to be slashed out. It was fierce and murderous, and it directly split the palm force open. It was like a scissor that cut a piece of cloth from the center, and it emanated an ear-piercing sound from friction. Humph! Wanchuan's imposing aura grew even more violent after his first strike was obstructed, and his long hair fluttered while he revealed a domineering and unrestrained aura of superiority. He took a step on the ground while his palms seemed to hold the sun and moon, and his entire body glowed while he slapped down with his palms at Xianxia once more. Instantly, everyone seemed to have seen a vast ocean suddenly surging down from the sky with a shocking impetus, and it intended to drown the world. Xianxia didn't dare dally and made a move as well. His calm expression revealed a strand of killing intent, while he utilized both palm and fingers to form sword chi that covered the sky and slashed down both horizontally and vertically. Hiss! 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 Numerous thick strands of sword chi that shot into the sky intersected while emanating multicolored blazing lights. It seemed like it was plowing through the sky and tearing through the earth. The 5 strands of sword chi intersected together and dispersed all attacks beneath their edge. The 2 of them were locked in battle. One of them executed palm strikes that were violent like the ocean, and it was overbearing and fierce. The other executed fierce and murderous sword chi that shot into the surroundings, and they were locked tightly in battle. The spectators were able to clearly notice that the aftershock from their battle actually caused the training arena to be shaken to the point of trembling and droning without end. Immortal force raged endlessly within it, causing it to be like a dazzling and resplendent volcano that was on the verge of erupting, and it cast the heavens and the earth into a shade. The spectators in the surroundings were unable to take in all their eyes saw since a long time ago, and their minds were shaken. Wanchuan was extremely strong beyond all doubt. He who'd advanced into the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm was many stages above Xianxia, and he'd even grasped an ultimate immortal art of the clan. Such strength was sufficient for him to charge into the top 100 ranks of the continental Ascension rankings. Most people looked extremely favorably upon him in this battle. After all, even though his opponent's combat strength was heaven-defying, his opponent was only at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm in the end, and this was his opponent's greatest weakness. But never had they imagined that as soon as the battle erupted, Wanchuan was actually unable to gain any advantage, and it seemed like they were equally matched. Even though this fellow has advanced into the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm, his combat strength has actually more than doubled. He's simply a freak. Everyone was astounded in their hearts. It was truly difficult for them to imagine how a young man at the heavenly immortal realm could possibly possess such an unimaginable combat strength. Needless to say, you're a genius in the path of immortality. Unfortunately, the greater a genius one is, the easier it is for one to die early because you've offended my clan. During the battle, Wanchuan suddenly let out a long howl while his entire body was suffused with surging waves. He seemed as if he was possessed by the god of water, and he revealed an imposing aura while his might rose violently once more. At the same time, a thick, blunt, and pitch-black saber appeared in his hand. The saber was 1.3 m in length and had the width of a palm, and it was branded with numerous dense and profound patterns. As soon as it appeared, It emanated a horrifying, vicious, and bloodthirsty aura, and it caused Inauthentic's imposing aura to become even more violent and formidable. The soul-severing mountain smasher, a high-rank dark spirit grade immortal artifact. It's a ferocious weapon that was supposedly tempered and refined by an ancestor of the Yin clan in the bloodland of sinners, and he used the souls and fierce aura of 8,000 sinners to refine it. 9 levels of strength are sealed within it. I wonder how many levels of the seals Inauthentic is able to release. In the distance, Gu Yutong evaluated with a light voice, and he obviously had a clear understanding of this ferocious weapon. Inauthentic has only advanced into the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm not long ago, so he'll at most be able to release 5 to 7 levels of the seal, Luo Zifeng added from the side. Now, if Xianxia were to continue fighting him barehanded, then Xianxia would fall into a losing battle. The nearby Gu Yutong nodded as well as he deeply agreed. It wasn't just the two of them. All the nearby experts had discerned this as well. Inauthentic was at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm in the beginning, and now that he'd utilized a ferocious weapon like the soul-severing mountain smasher, he surely intended to defeat Xianxia in one go without giving him any chance to continue struggling. OM! A saber cry shocked the heavens as it rose into the sky. Inauthentic held the saber in his hand as he slashed it down at Xianxia. The edge of the saber was shimmered with a pitch-black glow, and it carried a horrifying and icy-cold aura as it emanated a sharp howl that caused others to shudder. This strike carried a violent, unreasonable, unrestrained, and domineering might, and it practically vividly displayed the essence of the Tao of Blades. The Tao of Blades was domineering, wild, uninhibited, and unrestrained, and it was a completely different path when compared to the Sword Tao, yet there was no advantage or disadvantage between the two. Actually, every single Tao had no disadvantage or advantage from another Tao, and it depended on whether the user was skilled and proficient in the Tao. Obviously, Inauthentic's attainments in the Tao of Blades had arrived at a shocking height, so as soon as the strike was executed, it actually caused everyone outside the arena to feel a strand of horror. Their hands and feet felt icy cold while their minds suffered a great blow. Xianxia's eyes narrowed as well while his palms and fingers slashed repeatedly. In an instant, an entire 100+ strands of sword chi had been slashed out. Every single strand of sword chi was condensed to the point of seeming to be material, and they were thick and vast. They emanated deafening and rumbling explosions as they collided with the blade chi from the saber, and it shook the 9 heavens. However, this was barely able to resist the might of only a single strike from Inauthentic's saber. "Little fellow, reveal your weapon, otherwise you'll die without a doubt." Inauthentic roared with laughter in an unrestrained and complacent manner before he struck once more with his saber in hand. He was like a war god that was skilled in the saber, and he emanated a peerless, imposing aura that was domineering and oppressive. When he saw this, Xianxia was clearly aware that he had to utilize his true strength, so he lightly spat out 3 words. "As you wish." His voice hadn't finished resounding in the air when a pitch-black, lusterless, and simple immortal sword had appeared in his white and slender palm, and it was extremely ordinary. But at the instant it fell into Xianxia's palm, a sword cry that shook the 9 heavens resounded through the sky. At this moment, the talisman armament that had undergone a completely new transformation was unsheathed. Sword howls surged like a tide and resounded throughout the world. It seemed to be able to pierce through metal and split rocks, and it pierced everyone's eardrums to the point of faintly aching while their souls felt as if it was pricked by needles, causing an icy cold and horrifying aura to arise within them. This was the power and influence of the sword. Everyone was astounded and seemed to have never imagined that Xianxia was actually able to possess an immortal artifact with such might. What treasure is that? It probably possesses a might at the high rank of the dark spirit grade. It wouldn't be a divine weapon handed down in the Liang clan, right? The sounds of discussion resounded. Everyone was able to discern that purely based on the might of their immortal artifacts. The simple immortal sword in Xianxia's hand was actually on par with Inauthentic's soul-severing mountain smasher. That seems to be... At the same time, bright light erupted from the distant Gu Yutong's eyes as he seemed to have recognized something. Yet he didn't dare be sure for certain reasons. He seemed to be surprised and doubtful. Interesting, truly interesting. The nearby Luo Zifeng's gaze was deep and flickered endlessly while he stared at the immortal sword in Xianxia's hand. And he actually wasn't willing to miss a single glance of it. Clang! A sword howl echoed. Xianxia held the talisman armament in hand while revealing a fierce and murderous expression. And he was like an emperor of the sword as he slashed out with his sword. A blazing and vast strand of sword chi shot into the sky, and it seemed like a river of stars that crushed down from the sky. Bang! Saber and sword collided and erupted with a myriad of fine blade chi and sword lights. It swept towards all directions and caused the entire training arena to fall into chaos. Little fellow, that immortal sword in your hand seems... Inauthentic's eyes revealed a ghastly light that carried a wisp of horror. He actually seemed to have recognized something from Xianxia's talisman armament, and he seemed to not dare believe it. Swoosh! Xianxia slashed once more, and he didn't give Inauthentic the chance to speak any nonsense. This strike was entirely different from before. It carried the laws of fire and water, and there was water within the flames on the blade. Both of these laws merged, rubbed, and collided with each other, and they erupted with the phenomena of an ocean of flames and icy mist that illuminated the heavens and the earth and was a rather magnificent scene. Humph! You're actually able to merge two different laws. Your comprehension ability isn't bad. Unfortunately, your strength is still too weak. Inauthentic grunted coldly as he sensed the oppressive force that suffused the strand of sword chi, and he didn't dare get distracted anymore. He immediately strode forward and drew his blade, and then suddenly twisted his wrist before chopping down with his saber. One could clearly notice that when this strike was executed, numerous mysterious and complicated talisman diagrams suddenly lit up on the body of the saber, and every single one that lit up caused the might of the blade to rise explosively by a level. Moreover, when the fifth talisman diagram was lit up, the entire blade seemed to have countless talisman markings circulating on it, and it actually emanated waving blue-colored lightning that was dark blue, beautiful, dazzling, and resplendent. Amongst the 9 levels of strength sealed within the soul-severing mountain smasher, he has already utilized 5 levels. In this way, it would seem like Inauthentic didn't underestimate his opponent. Luo Zifeng judged in a light voice. At the same time, Xianxia's eyes narrowed as well. He wasn't frightened by his opponent's imposing aura, but he clearly sensed a slightly familiar aura from Inauthentic's saber. It was the aura of a divine talisman. If he wasn't wrong, then Inauthentic's saber was obviously an existence similar to a talisman armament. And the reason felt it was similar was because Xianxia was clearly aware that it wasn't a true talisman armament because the divine talisman sealed within it was incomplete while the method of refining it was incorrect. The dark lightning divine talisman? Unfortunately, the method of refinement is too inferior. After he saw through the profundity of this saber with a single glance, Xianxia felt relaxed in his heart and threw all of this to the back of his head. Inauthentic was a disciple of the Yin clan, whereas his ancestor of the Dark Emperor Yuan Sun. So they naturally knew how to refine the Dark Lightning Divine Talisman. Thus, there was nothing to be surprised about. All of these took a long time to describe, yet it actually occurred in an instant. In the next moment, both of them collided once more. The sword chi that was like a sea of flames and icy mist collided with the blade light, and the sound of the explosion shook the world while the aftershock was like a violent storm that howled through the heavens and the earth. Xianxia wasn't surprised at all that his sword strike was resisted, and he slashed down once more. This sword strike was once again different from before, and it contained the laws of the grand Taos of water, fire, and metal. As soon as it was executed, water and fire merged while carrying a peerlessly fierce and sharp golden light. 3 laws merged together? Inauthentic's eyes focused. He was aware a long time ago that the kid at the heavenly immortal realm before him had grasped 7 types of laws of the Grand Tao. Yet he never imagined that a single strike from Xianxia would actually contain the energy of 3 laws at the same time. Utilizing 3 types of laws at once and not utilizing them separately was so difficult that it wasn't something a cultivation at the heavenly immortal realm could accomplish. But it just so happened that such a situation appeared before his eyes. So how could Inauthentic not be shocked? Even the nearby spectators were horrified by this scene because the energy of the laws complied with the Heaven Tao, and they were the most difficult to utilize. Some heavenly immortal realm experts that possessed extremely formidable natural talents might be able to grasp the energy of 3 or more laws of the Grand Tao. However, due to the limitations of their cultivations, they were at most capable of executing the energy of only 2 laws at once. Only mysterious immortal realm experts were capable of executing 3 laws at once. But now, Xianxia had actually executed 3 types of laws with a cultivation at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm, so this was extremely astounding. Lightning execution. On the arena, even though Inauthentic was surprised, his movements didn't slow down in the slightest. His saber tore through the sky while another mysterious and profound talisman diagram lit up on the saber, causing the 1.3 m long pitch-black saber to instantly become covered with a violent and dark blue thunderstorm. When looked at from afar, it seemed like the source of all thunder, and it caused one's scalp to go numb. Bang! The saber howl was like the rumble of thunder, and it flashed through the clear sky. This strike was like a tribulation lightning of judgment that descended from the Heaven Tao, and it intended to crush all evil. Bang! 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 The sword chi and blade light collided once more and resisted each other violently. It was like 2 enormous stars were fighting to the death, and they collided violently, causing explosions that made everyone feel their vital blood roil while their souls were on the verge of exploding. In the end, both of them collapsed inch by inch and transformed into a rain of light that covered the sky before vanishing without a trace. How terrifying! An ordinary expert at the initial stage of the mysterious immortal realm would probably find this strike impossible to resist, right? How formidable! Xianxia really as difficult to deal with as the rumors say. He's only at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm. This is simply unbelievable. Everyone was astounded, and they only dared to exclaim with shock at this moment while the gazes they shot at Xianxia's tall figure was filled with a wisp of shock. If you only have this bit of ability, then you'll die without a doubt. Inauthentic's gaze was slightly gloomy, while his expression became even more cruel. Being tangled with a fellow at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm for so long caused him to feel humiliated, and this caused the killing intent in his heart to grow even further. He decided that no matter what happened, he would cripple this kid today. Otherwise, if this kid was allowed to grow, he would surely become a great disaster. As he spoke, he didn't wait for Xianxia to make a move before seizing the initiative to attack. Stomp! He stepped through the sky like he was moving on flat ground, and it shook the surrounding space to the point violent ripples arose. On the other hand, Inauthentic had already flashed over like a hawk, while his hands held onto the saber, like he was swinging a blade capable of slashing through the sky. OM! OM! Strands of violent fluctuations surged out from his body and poured into the blade, causing talisman markings to surge on the pitch-black saber in his hand, and then strings of dense talisman markings flew out. Everyone was able to clearly see that the 7th talisman marking diagram had suddenly lit up, and it was like a dazzling sun that erupted with divine brilliance. Inauthentic's aura became even heavier along with this, yet his countenance turned slightly pale. Obviously, the strength exhausted by this strike was slightly strenuous to him. Lightning arc blade. Suddenly, Inauthentic shouted explosively with a voice that was like a tiger howl that shook the surroundings, and the strike that he was accumulating force for a long time for suddenly slashed down. This strike's impetus was violent and vast to the limit, and it perfectly merged the laws of the grand Taos of lightning and water within this strike. As soon as it appeared, it crushed out a narrow, long, and horrifying rift in space. Space was truly slashed apart here, and it meant that the spatial laws of the immortal dimension's martial emperor domain were unable to restrain the might of this strike. Of course, it was because the restrictions on this arena were slightly weak. After all, it was an arena on the 5th level, and it was only suitable for experts at the initial stage of the mysterious immortal realm to compete on. But even then, it was sufficient to display how terrifying and overbearing Inauthentic's attack was. In an instant, the experts spectating in the surroundings were horrified by the imposing aura of this strike, and their figures uncontrollably dodged backwards in unison. Some people with slightly weaker cultivations even turned ghastly pale from their shock while their entire bodies trembled. This strike was too violent and unrestrained. This kid from the Yin clan is capable of charging into the top 100 of the continental Ascension rankings by relying solely on this strike. In the extreme distance, Gu Yutong's expression was serious as he spoke. Luo Zifeng deeply agreed and frowned as he said, "I'm only worried that she might not be able to resist it. If he's injured, then it would heavily injure his soul and might even damage his natural talent, causing him to be reduced to a mediocre figure." Gu Yutong's mouth opened and was about to say something, yet his gaze suddenly erupted with a wisp of divine light. His gaze locked onto the distant training arena, and his expression that had been composed since the beginning actually revealed a wisp of shock that was spreading throughout his face. The violent edge of Yin Wanshuan's saber tore through the sky, and the fierce gale it emanated caused Xianxia's clothes to flutter along with his dense long hair. The might of this violent strike even caused the skin on his entire body to faintly ache. However, there wasn't any fear on his face, and his gaze grew even brighter as if there was a sea of lava blazing within them. It was his battle intent boiling. This strike had completely lit up the battle intent in his heart, while the flames of rage that had accumulated in the bottom of his heart from Liang Zhan and Liang Liang's heavy injury erupted completely at this moment. Bang! His entire body emanated boundless light while a copious and irresistible vital energy shot into the sky. It was like a blazing sun intended to soar into the sky and illuminate the world. He held up the talisman armament, spun his wrist and slashed down. 3 simple movements were carried out in one smooth motion like flowing water, and it seemed otherworldly. OM! Sword howls were like a torrent that surged and rumbled through the heavens and the earth. At the same time, a wisp of wavy and gorgeous sword chi condensed in the sword. As soon as it appeared, it was suffused with a myriad of blazing talisman markings, and it illuminated the world. This sword strike was sometimes extremely verdant, sometimes blazing like fire, sometimes raging like the ocean, and sometimes peerlessly sharp and dazzling. It contained the laws of 4 grand Daos, and it exceeded the imagination of all. At the instant this sword strike soared through the sky, peerless sword chi actually minced apart the surrounding airflow and caused the heavens and the earth to be cast into a shade. Swish! Under the astounded and dazed gazes of all the spectators, this sword chi actually easily slashed apart Yin Wanshuan's blade light into 2. It was like it was tearing apart a piece of cloth, and it was so fierce, swift, and easy. Everyone was astonished, even if it was amongst mysterious immortal realm experts. A strand of sword chi that contained the energy of 4 types of laws could only be executed by some extremely formidable existences. Yet now it had actually appeared in the hands of a young man at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm. Moreover, this sword strike had even easily destroyed Yin Wanshuan's perfectly condensed saber strike and slashed it in 2. This was simply unbelievable. On the other hand, Yin Wanshuan was even shocked to the point his entire body went cold while his pupils dilated, and he felt a chill run down his spine. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? No! When he saw this sword chi's momentum didn't reduce and still continued to slash down directly towards him, Yin Wanshuan suddenly let out a fierce and practically insane roar as he waved his saber repeatedly. However, that strike from before had already exhausted a great deal of his strength, so he was actually shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly when facing the strand of sword chi. Even though it was still resisted by him in the end, he was only a step away from leaving the arena. Pooh! Yin Wanshuan's figure shook while his countenance suddenly went pale, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood. His cold and cruel face had become savage and warped while his shocked expression was covered in dense disbelief. The crowd was in an uproar. Yin Wanshuan, who was at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm, had actually fallen into a disadvantageous position from this strike. Exactly 4 types of laws at the same time? How many experts with such natural endowment can be found amongst all the heavenly immortal realm experts in Southbridge continent? Gu Yutong exclaimed with admiration. Xianxia's display had similarly exceeded his expectations as Chen, she grew stronger along with his opponent, and it seemed as if Xianxia's limits could never be discerned. Perhaps only the younger generation of the 4 great continents possess figures like him. But unfortunately, why was he recruited by Liang Bing? Luo Zifeng sighed without end, and his intent to rope Xianxia to his side great even stronger. Little bastard, do you think you've won? Haha, I've said it before. I'll blast apart your soul and made you a complete idiot. So you're bound to be unable to escape calamity today. On the arena, Inauthentic suddenly roared with mad laughter as he flipped his palm, and he actually withdrew a dark and shuttle-shaped treasure that was fine like a needle and was suffused with a horrifying glow. What a horrifying aura! The pupils of the surrounding crowd constricted as they felt indescribable horror from the shuttle-shaped treasure in Inauthentic's palm, and it seemed as if their souls would perish as long as they slightly touched this treasure. That's a god-killer needle. Someone recognized it and spoke with shock. What? Didn't this treasure vanish along with the eradication of the soul vampire Immortal beast? Even though the soul vampire Immortal beast was eradicated, it doesn't mean that the god-killer needle has vanished, and it's extremely easy for ancient powers like the Yin clan to gather some. Xianxia's in trouble now, unless he crushes the god-killer needle, otherwise it's bound to invade and destroy his soul. It's extremely terrifying and is the most difficult to deal with. Looks like the Yin clan has decided to leave him no chance of recovering. Obviously, they feel that if Xianxia's allowed to grow, then he'll surely become a disaster for the Yin clan in the future. The crowd discussed animatedly. All of them had never expected that Inauthentic had actually prepared such an extremely malicious treasure since the beginning. The god-killer needle was refined from a poisonous spike at the center of the soul vampire Immortal beast's forehead. So long as one came into the slightest contact with it, then one's soul would instantly collapse and be destroyed. It was an extremely malicious weapon. But a few thousands of years ago, along with the soul vampire Immortal beasts being slaughtered to the point of eradication, the god-killer needle had vanished, and it very rarely made an appearance. No one had expected that Inauthentic would actually be able to possess this treasure. The Yin clan has gone a bit too far. In the distance, Gu Yutong's face sank while he spoke coldly. He knew very well that, with the might Xianxia had revealed earlier, it was almost impossible for Xianxia to resist the attack of the god-killer needle. The Yin clan is worried he'll grow to become a disaster for them. Luo Zifeng seemed to be speaking on behalf of the Yin clan, yet his expression turned icy cold. The meaning of the martial emperor domain was to temper one's cultivation in the martial Tao and improve one's strength. If it was in the outside world, then no one would say another word about a treasure like the god-killer needle, yet it was like a taboo in the martial emperor domain because no one was willing to go against an opponent that possessed a god-killer needle. Little bastard, did you think you can be lawless with the protection of the Liang clan? Kneel down before me now and kowtow to atone for your sins, and I can spare your life. Inauthentic seemed to have consumed a pill of confidence when he grasped the god-killer needle in his hand, and he recovered his arrogant and cruel appearance from before. Moreover, the gaze he looked at Xianxia with was filled with icy cold disdain. Xianxia didn't know what the god-killer needle was before this, but after he heard the discussions that came from the surroundings, he understood how malicious this treasure was. But he wasn't afraid because his soul was protected by the Fuxi divine statue, and the river diagram fragments were even circulating without end within his soul. If his soul was so easy to destroy, then he would be utterly incapable of coming this far. Even if his soul was destroyed, what about it? If worst came to worst, he could execute the Worldmen technique and divide another strand of his soul from his clone. Under such circumstances, Xianxia couldn't help but sneer without end in his heart when he heard Inauthentic actually start bragging from feeling that he had Xianxia in the palms of his hand. What? Hesitating? Ha ha ha. Little bastard. You actually fear death as well. Inauthentic became even more arrogant when he saw Xianxia stay quiet, and he seemed as if victory was within his grasp. Actually, if he didn't have no choice, he wouldn't utilize the god-killer needle. After all, once he utilized it, the reputation of the Yin clan would suffer great effect. But he couldn't care about all of this at this moment. For the sake of taking revenge for his younger brother and completely defeating Xianxia on the arena, he could only stop at nothing. The spectators in the surroundings frowned without end as well because they felt Wanchuan was going too far. There were even some people that were extremely worried for Chen Shi. After all, if an expert with extraordinary natural talent like this were to have his soul destroyed, it would be a great pity. Only Wanchuan's younger brother, Wanfeng, was laughing coldly in the crowd, and he was filled with delight from obtaining vengeance. Idiot! Chen Shi finally couldn't stand this fellow being delighted by himself, and Chen Shi spat out a single word in a light voice. At the same time, he casually swung his hand, causing an extraordinary strand of sword chi to slash out directly. You actually still dare to make a move against me? Wanchuan was stunned while his smile froze. Under such circumstances, not only had Chen Shi not begged for forgiveness, he even dared to humiliate Wanchuan. And this caused Wanchuan's face to instantly turn gloomy before being suffused with a wisp of ruthlessness. Hiss! He swiftly swung his hand, causing the god-killer needle that was fine like a strand of hair to tear through the sky, and it transformed into a jet-black bolt of lightning that swiftly vanished. It actually wasn't affected in the slightest as it penetrated through the strand of sword chi Chen Shi executed. In the next moment, the wisp of jet-black light had appeared above Chen Shi before piercing down forcefully. The hearts of everyone tightened when they saw this scene, and some even couldn't bear to watch. Swish! Chen Shi's talisman armament soared through the sky while its blades surged with 5 strands of sword chi that respectively represented the grand Tao laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. They interweaved and circulated together to form a 5-colored vortex of sword chi that blocked before the god-killer needle. Executing 5 grand Tao laws at the same time? Someone exclaimed with shock, and it was like a barrel of gunpowder that was lit ablaze. It caused the scene to explode into an uproar. At this moment, the faces of everyone were covered in shock and astonishment. They finally understood that Chen Shi had always been holding back. The eyes of the distant Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng opened wide while they almost bit through their tongues. How could this kid possess such a deep foundation? Is he really still at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm? Those are 5 grand Tao laws. Even an expert at the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm wouldn't be able to execute it without a sufficiently formidable natural talent. Crack, 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 crack. The jet-black god-killer needle that was like a bolt of lightning was obstructed by the 5-colored sword chi vortex, and they rubbed against each other and emanated sharp and fine explosions. This scene caused the uproar in the surroundings to quiet down as the gazes of everyone stared fixedly at this. Will Chen Shi's strike be able to obstruct the god-killer needle? Even Chen Shi's opponent, Wanchuan, couldn't help but be slightly anxious at this moment, and he was envious of Chen Shi's shocking natural talent and worried that the god-killer needle would really be obstructed by Chen Shi, because if that happened, then he wouldn't know how to deal with the battle before him. Swoosh! In the next moment, under the various gazes of everyone present here, the jet-black god-killer needle actually seemed as if it had teleported and directly penetrated the 5-colored sword chi vortex to pierce forcefully into Chen Shi's forehead. The scene occurred too quickly and caught everyone off guard, causing them to cry out involuntarily. Even if they knew since the beginning that the god-killer needle was extremely overbearing and malicious, they never imagined that it would actually be so terrifying and was simply impossible to resist. For a time, everyone in the surroundings of the arena was speechless, and it was deathly silent. All of them didn't dare believe that a peerless young man with heaven-defying combat strength would have his soul crippled right before their eyes. What a pity! Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng sighed in simultaneously. Ha ha ha! This is retribution. Only Wanfeng couldn't restrain the excitement in his heart any longer, and he laughed loudly with complacency. In this deathly silent and oppressive atmosphere, it seemed to be extremely ear-piercing, and it drew a wave of furious stares from the surroundings, causing his laughter to stop abruptly before he shut his mouth. But a wisp of a cold and complacent smile couldn't be concealed on the corners of his mouth, and he said to himself, "All of you idiots. Why are all of you blindly worrying for a little bastard that isn't related to all of you at all? His soul has been crippled, but has it got to do with all of you? Humph! This young master's mood is good today, so I won't make a fuss about it with all of you for now. At this moment, Inauthentic heaved a long sigh of relief on the arena as well, and his cold face was suffused with a gloomy smile. Unfortunately, I wasted a god-killer needle. That's a treasure that can't be exchanged for with any treasure, but it's fine. Since this kid has been eliminated today, it's equivalent to having one less disaster in the future. Numerous thoughts swiftly flashed through Inauthentic's heart. As he looked at Xianxia who stood transfixed in the distance, he couldn't help but feel a wave of complacency. He immediately walked over and slapped down with his palm. He intended to strike Xianxia down to a kneeling position before reclaiming the god-killer needle from Xianxia's body to see if it could be reused. Of course, there was also the simple immortal sword in Xianxia's hand. It was something he'd covered for a long time. However, right before his slap descended, Xianxia who stood there without moving suddenly opened his eyes, and his gaze was piercingly cold, deep, and surged with a horrifying glow. Everyone felt that Xianxia had been struck by the god-killer needle, so he would surely suffer the fate of having his soul destroyed in the next moment. Even Inauthentic thought so as well. After all, it was a god-killer needle that slaughtered the soul and destroyed all before it. It was an extremely malicious and overbearing treasure, so how could there be any possibility of survival? Yet now, Xianxia who was originally standing there without moving had actually opened his eyes. His gaze was piercingly cold and deep, and it surged with a frightening glow. At this instant, Inauthentic gasped with shock, and his soul almost left his body. Before he could recover from his shock, he felt his throat pressured as a strong palm had choked it tightly. It caused his entire body to stiffen, and no matter how he struggled, he was unable to struggle free, causing his face to flush red from suffocation. Everyone suddenly recovered from their shock when they saw this. But when they saw she was actually completely unharmed and had captured Inauthentic in his hand. Tempestuous waves couldn't help but arise in their hearts. He's actually still alive. This was simply even more unbelievable than the previous scene, and if they weren't able to sense their surroundings at this moment, they would have thought that they were seeing things. This fellow! In the distance, both Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng were stunned, and they exclaimed in unison. This had greatly exceeded their expectations indeed, and it caused them to almost not dare believe their eyes. You! Inauthentic's throat was choked tightly by Xianxia, and it caused his face to warp and flush red. Moreover, his face was filled with terror as he stared fixedly at Xianxia, and no matter how he racked his head, he was unable to figure out how Xianxia was able to survive under the might of the god-killer needle. Thump! Xianxia exerted force with his arm and suddenly pressed Inauthentic down to kneel before him. Didn't you like to make others kneel? Have a taste of it as well. Suffering such horrible humiliation under the gazes of everyone present here caused blood to rush into Inauthentic's head, and it felt like it was on the verge of exploding as he roared furiously. Xianxia! Kill me if you have the balls. Do you think I don't dare to? Xianxia pressed down forcefully on Inauthentic's head to prevent him from fleeing before his other hand flipped to reveal a dark and fine needle-shaped treasure. Surprisingly, it was the god-killer needle. When they saw this scene, everyone in the surroundings finally believed that Xianxia had avoided calamity. Moreover, he'd used some unknown method to take control of the god-killer needle. On the other hand, when he saw the god-killer needle in Xianxia's palm, Inauthentic's face instantly revealed extremely terror while his eyes almost split apart. Originally, he was fearless because even if Xianxia killed him here, he would still be able to thrive after leaving the Martial Emperor domain. But it was different now. If Xianxia used the god-killer needle against him, then his soul would absolutely be destroyed, and even if he was able to come back to life, he would be reduced to someone that was mentally challenged. So Inauthentic was afraid, and he truly felt the threat from impending death. Let me off and the slate between us will be wiped clean. I can swear to the heavens. He had an ashen face while he spoke with great difficulty. Do you think that's possible? A wisp of ridicule and coldness suffused the corners of Xianxia's mouth, and he stopped delaying and raised the god-killer needle before slapping it down. Stop! A furious howl resounded from beneath the arena. Unfortunately, Xianxia was indifferent towards it. Pooh! The god-killer needle pierced Wanchuan's head before Xianxia kicked him out of the arena. Bang! Wanchuan's figure hadn't descended to the ground when it exploded in midair and transformed into countless specks of light. The specks of light were pieces of his soul. If it was only like this, then so long as he left the martial emperor domain, he wouldn't have to worry about his soul being destroyed. Unfortunately, the god-killer needle was too malicious. It transformed into a jet-black flowing light that seemed like a greedy locust, and as soon as it appeared amongst the pieces of Wanchuan's soul, it completely devoured all the pieces before vanishing completely. All the experts in the surroundings were horrified when they saw this scene. They didn't feel that Xianxia was too cruel but were slightly afraid of the destructive force caused by the god-killer needle. You deserve death. The voice from before resounded once more, and it was filled with resentment and fury. Xianxia raised his eyes to look over, and he saw Wanfeng that was within the crowd. At this moment, Wanfeng was angered to the point his entire body trembled, and his face was livid and warped while his gaze was extremely resentful. Your older brother was crippled and made an idiot. As a younger brother, could it be that you don't intend to take revenge for him? Asked Xianxia with a calm voice. He didn't feel any mental burden from destroying Wanchuan's soul, and he felt that the bellyful of rage he hadn't been completely vented instead. So he targeted Wanfeng, who was below the arena. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's hearts jerked while they felt astounded in their hearts. Xianxia obviously intends to pursue and attack without letting a single one of them escape. Actually, they were able to understand Xianxia's feeling by just thinking about it. Earlier, Wanchuan and his younger brother had provoked Xianxia repeatedly. Moreover, not only had they utilized the god-killer needle, they even wanted to cripple his soul and threatened to continue taking revenge in the outside world. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder to them that Xianxia took such action. Wanfeng was stunned. He seemed to have never imagined that Xianxia would invite him to battle, and for a time, he was stunned on the spot while his expression changed indeterminately. What? Could it be that you don't even have the courage to take revenge for your elder brother? He fell to such a state for the sake of helping you take revenge. Xianxia continued speaking in a manner that was neither swift nor slow. Wanfeng's temperament was one where he was unable to endure provocation. Otherwise he wouldn't be provoked by Liang Zhan and Liang that day to the point his soul was heavily injured and left the martial emperor domain in an extremely humiliating way. At this moment, when he heard Xianxia mention his older brother, Wanchuan, repeatedly, he instantly lost all reason and couldn't restrain himself any longer. He howled furiously. Bastard! Do you think this young master is afraid of you? As he spoke, he'd started charging towards the arena. Fool! Stop right now. Right at this moment, a delicate shout suddenly resounded. At the same time, a fiery red figure flashed over from the distant crowd like a bolt of lightning. Surprisingly, it was the clan's Fenger. She spoke in a timely manner. Unfortunately, she never expected that under his blazing rage, Wanfeng had lost all reason a long time ago, and he disregarded everything as he charged towards the arena like a mad cow. So how could he possibly stop now? Thus, when she intended to stop him, Wanfeng had already stepped foot on the arena, and he flashed towards Xianxia. Stupid! Fool! A pair of useless fools! Wanfeng was infuriated to the point of almost gnashing her teeth into pieces when she saw this, and her ample chest rose and fell rapidly. But she was a disciple of the clan after all, so she naturally wouldn't watch as Wanfeng courted death. So in the next moment, she shouted at Xianxia with a grim voice. Xianxia, stay your hand. Otherwise, you'll definitely die from offending my clan. Xianxia paid no attention to her at all because when he saw Wanfeng charging over to him, how could he possibly let such a superb opportunity slip by? Swoosh! In the next moment, he didn't hesitate in the slightest to execute a brilliant strand of sword chi, and it was coiled with the laws of 5 types of Grand Daos. He'd already utilized his entire strength. At this instant, sword chi surged and Wanfeng felt a lethal aura assault his face. He suddenly returned to his senses from his infuriated state and stopped abruptly while feeling extreme regret. What's wrong with me? Even Big Brother wasn't a match for him, so why did I have to come take revenge? Fool! What are you standing there for? Flee! Quickly! Fonger's furious shout erupted by his ears, causing Wanfeng's face to go grim, and he knew that the chaotic state of his mind had affected his reaction. However, he felt a piercing pain before his eyes when he was just about to dodge, and then his field of vision was enveloped by a vast and brilliant 5-colored strand of sword chi. Pooh! Under the horrified gazes of everyone in the surroundings, Wanfeng stood there like a wooden puppet that was without a soul, and he didn't resist at all. His figure was directly slashed into two by Xianxia's sword chi, and then it transformed into a rain of light that vanished on the arena. He wasn't really killed, and only his soul had been heavily injured. After all, this was the martial emperor domain, so no one was able to kill another without a malicious weapon that was a taboo like the God-Killer needle. But even then, this strike was sufficient to make Wanfeng bedridden for 3 to 5 years. You deserve death. Fonger's beautiful brows knit together when she saw this, and her beautiful eyes almost emanated flames. She glanced at Xianxia with an icy-cold gaze, and she seemed as if she wished she could use her gaze to kill him. I challenge you. Do you dare to accept? In the next moment, Fonger took a deep breath and spoke with an icy-cold tone. The spectators burst into an uproar. Never had they imagined that the situation would develop to such an extent. Fonger is an existence ranked at the 11th position on the Continental Ascension rankings. Yet she actually intends to challenge Chen 11, who is at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm. Isn't this bullying the weak? I've said so in the past. Even your older sister doesn't have the qualifications to challenge me. Xianxia's answer was extremely simple yet thought-provoking. The meaning behind his words was that even if her older sister, Miao Miao, were to come here, he wouldn't accept her challenge. So was Fonger even worthy? Fonger was arrogant and unruly. Yet she wasn't stupid, so she naturally perceived the meaning behind his words, causing her beautiful face to sink as she sneered. I finally understand why you said those words that day. It turns out that you were worried my older sister would desire to get even with you one day, so you intentionally said that, right? Little bastard. After staying silent for a short moment, she said calmly, it doesn't make a difference no matter what you say. He really couldn't be bothered to be harassed by her unreasonable demands. There were some things that were most forceful when done, and merely relying on words would cause it to seem weak and feeble. If you're afraid, then you're afraid. Why put on an act? Fonger didn't intend to let Xianxia off instead, and she sneered. You're right, this is the martial emperor domain, so out of consideration for the rules, I'm indeed unable to do anything to you. But don't let me encounter you in the outside world. Otherwise the consequences will be worse than Liang Zhen and Liang Liang. Xianxia's eyes narrowed and were suffused with a piercingly cold and sharp glow, and he went silent for a short moment before he said, so in this way, you don't intend to let this matter go until death. Ha! Fonger seemed as if she'd heard a joke, and she laughed with disdain. Until death? Do you think a little bastard like you that's being protected beneath the roof of the Liang clan is worthy? She nodded and said, I understand. What did he understand? Everyone was bewildered, and they were unable to figure out exactly what she meant. Fonger was unable to figure it out as well, yet she was clearly aware that she had no intention of showing weakness of compromising at all. So she could only think negatively. You wouldn't be thinking of going against my clan by yourself, right? Her voice was filled with boundless ridicule. That's enough. Fonger, your clan has gone a bit too far today. Right at this moment, a clear and bright voice resounded from the distance. Who is it that dares to berate Fonger like this? Everyone was astounded and looked over towards the extreme distance. There were two figures flying over from there. One had slanted blows and sharp eyes, and he was cold and thin. The other wore an embroidered marten coat, and he revealed an unrestrained bearing. It was precisely the 7th-ranked Gu Yutong and 5th-ranked Luo Zifeng. The two of them had just renewed their rankings on the Continental Ascension rankings, causing them to possess brilliant reputations. Coupled with the support of a great power standing behind each of them, it was impossible for them to not be known by all. When they saw the two of them, all the experts in the surroundings couldn't help but come to a sudden understanding amidst their astonishment, because only these two that possessed both strength and status would dare to speak like this to Inflator. The person that spoke earlier was Gu Yutong. Even if the two of them were renowned figures, but when she saw there were actually people that rushed over to obstruct her from denouncing Xianxia, Inflator was extremely infuriated. She raised her head high and sneered as she said, "What? Both of you have come to mediate?" Gu Yutong frowned. "What sort of attitude is this?" Inflator grunted coldly and said, "My attitude can be better if you stand aside and wait for me to deal with this little bastard. If my mood is good, then I might have a chat with the two of you." At this moment, even Luo Zifeng couldn't bear the sight of this, and he said with displeasure, "Inflator, even your older sister wouldn't dare speak like this to me. Then how do you want me to speak?" Inflator's beautiful brows rose. "Does your Luo and Gu clans have any relationship with this little bastard? Why do you interfere in my business? And you even said I'm going too far? If the members of your clans were humiliated, then would the two of you be able to endure it? Unreasonable. Arrogant." Inflator was really as the rumors said, and she possessed a cold, unruly, and arrogant disposition. When they saw this disagreement, everyone actually moved their attention from Xianxia to Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng that had arrived in unison. All of them were slightly astounded, and they were clearly aware that all of this was because that Inflator's attitude was truly too arrogant. Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng had come over for no other reason than to seize this opportunity to win Xianxia over and see if they could sow some goodwill with him, and when they saw the intense argument between him and Inflator, they naturally held the intention to reconcile these two parties. But never had they imagined that Inflator would actually be so unreasonable and rude. Gu Yutong's face sank. As a figure that was ranked 7th on the continental Ascension rankings and a disciple of the Gu clan's younger generation that carried much weight in the clan, he naturally possessed his own pride. He immediately laughed as he said, "All right, didn't you want to challenge Xianxia? Then why don't we practice first?" As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present was shocked because all of them hadn't expected that Gu Yutong would actually join this dispute. Even Xianxia was rather surprised, and then he suddenly recalled the first time he met Gu Yutong a month ago. Gu Yutong's attitude towards him was rather warm and even expressed his desire to be friends with Xianxia. Originally, Xianxia merely took it to be a form of probing or perhaps a method to win him over, yet when he saw Gu Yutong actually join in the dispute now, he instantly had a slight change of attitude towards Gu Yutong. No one noticed that Luo Zifeng had always been observing Xianxia, and when he saw Xianxia's attitude towards Gu Yutong seemed to have become rather amiable, he instantly cried in his heart, "Shit." He was just like Gu Yutong and was extremely interested in Xianxia. He intended to win Xianxia over from the Liang clan, so how could he stand idly by when he saw Gu Yutong make the first move? "Count me in as well. Inflator, didn't you want to fight? I'll accompany you." Luo Zifeng smiled light-heartedly and spoke immediately. Everyone was astounded when they heard this. Luo Zifeng that's ranked 5th actually intends to join in as well? Actually, if one observed carefully, one would notice that the current situation wasn't simple at all. Shockingly, the shadow of the 4 great clans renowned in the Tao of Talismans, the Liang, Gu, Luo, and Yin clans stood behind these 4 young people. These 4 clans seemed to be the top 4 great powers in the Southbridge continent, and they possessed monstrous might and deep resources and reserves. Now, the disciples of the Gu and Luo clan didn't hesitate to fight the Yin clan's Inflator for the sake of a young man from the Liang clan. This situation was too thought-provoking. Inflator acutely noticed this as well, and she was slightly apprehensive in her heart as she said coldly, "What? Both of you intend to bully the weak?" These words obviously carried the meaning of admitting her inferiority, yet she spoke it in a justified and proud manner. This obviously showed how unreasonable her mentality and nature were. But when these words entered into the ears of the surrounding spectators, all of them were extremely amused, and it was even to the extent that some couldn't avoid from feeling disdain in their hearts. Bullying the weak? Then what about when you, Inflator, disregarded your identity and challenged Xianxia. Of course, all of them could only think this in their hearts. Yet they didn't dare speak of it. But Gu Yutong dared, and he didn't conceal his disdain at all as he smiled and said, "Bully the weak? To think that you were actually able to say it. Then why did you challenge Xianxia? Inflater, let me give you some advice. Leave now and stop running wild. Otherwise it wouldn't be good for anyone." Luo Zifeng spoke indifferently from the side. At this moment, Inflater finally perceived that Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng were obviously intending to help Xianxia today, and besides causing her to feel bewildered, she couldn't help but feel a wisp of resentment. She was bewildered why these two fellows would have nothing better to do than to interfere in her business, and she was resentful because they weren't helping her but helping the little bastard called Xianxia instead. "So in this way, both of you will surely obstruct me if I intend to condemn that little bastard?" Inflater's voice went cold as she questioned them. Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng glanced at each other, and they were just about to speak, yet right at this moment, a piercingly cold voice suddenly resounded. "Inflater, stand down for now. If they want to fight, then I'll accompany them." This voice was too unusual, and there was a proud tone amidst the coldness of this voice. In the Southbridge continent, only a single person possessed such a voice, and it was Yin Miao Miao. At this instant, all the people in the surroundings, including Gu Yutong and Yin Miao Miao, shot their gazes over towards the source of the voice. Sure enough, they saw Yin Miao Miao's graceful figure standing on a sharp rock in the distance. She wore black gauze clothes, had a beautiful appearance, and she carried a trace of a unique otherworld and proud aura. Instantly, everyone at the scene revealed a shocked expression. They were truly unable to imagine that Yin Miao Miao had actually made an appearance here. This was the Martial Emperor domain, and this was merely one of the many arenas on the 5th level. In the past, not to mention experts ranked in the top 10, even experts in the top 100 rarely appeared here. Yet now, top experts ranked 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 11th were gathered here. If news of this scene were to be spread to the outside world, then just this extraordinary lineup might be able to cause a mighty uproar. Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng were slightly surprised as well, and then their faces sank because Yin Miao Miao's words were obviously directed at them. But they didn't dare rashly agree to it. Even though they were only a few rankings apart, in the top 10 positions of the rankings, a difference of a single ranking was a completely different level, and it was even more brutal and severe than the lower rankings. Amidst the people present, only Xianxia didn't turn to look at Yin Miao Miao because he knew that she'd come. So why did he have to turn around and look at her? Similarly, only his expression was the calmest. Not to mention Yin Miao Miao, it would be futile even if Immortal Monarch Lin Hao came here because this was the Martial Emperor domain. According to the rules here, he was unafraid of anything. "Haha! Why aren't the two of you speaking?" When she saw Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng go silent, Inflater was unable to restrain the delight in her heart any longer, and she spoke with ridicule. "Stupid little girl. We're indeed afraid of your older sister, but we aren't afraid of you. If you consider it carefully, why don't you ask your older sister if she dares to challenge my older brother right now?" Gu Yutong sneered indifferently. The older brother he spoke of was naturally Gu Yueming, who was ranked 2nd and was one ranking above Yin Miao Miao. Inflater was instantly speechless because this was an indisputable truth. Xianxia couldn't help but be amused in his heart when he saw this scene. These are the disciples of clans that usually use their identity, honor, ranking, and background to speak. Strength is naturally an important factor, yet before they shed all pretenses, the thing they compare the most is those things besides strength. Of course, he didn't have any intention to belittle. He was just very clearly aware of the rules of the game between these disciples of great clans and powers during disputes. However, this wasn't suitable to him, and he'd never thought of following them. Right when Xianxia was sighing with emotion in his heart, the distant Yin Miao Miao spoke once more. "In less than a year, your older brother, Gu Yueming, will surely not be a match for me." This was her reply to Gu Yutong's words. She was clearly speaking about something that would happen in the future, yet it carried a convincing force because it was spoken by Yin Miao Miao. Presently, she'd already become a figure that was the hottest topic in the Southbridge continent, and she was like a dazzling and resplendent star that was rising gradually. Thus, no one dared to not take her words seriously. It was precisely because he'd considered this that Gu Yutong's face sank even more, and he finally said coldly, "I'll be waiting." After that, he spoke no further because he was unable to deny what Yin Miao Miao said, yet he was able to express his attitude towards it. "Fenger, let's go." Yin Miao Miao was completely indifferent to this, and she just instructed Yin Fenger before intending to leave. "Big sister, what about that little bastard? How could Yin Fenger let Chun Shi off just like this?" So she immediately targeted Chun Shi. "I'll talk with the patriarch to use every means possible to make the Liang clan abandon their protection of him. At that time, he'll be at your mercy." Yin Miao Miao spoke casually as if she was speaking about an insignificant decision, and from the beginning until the end, she hadn't spared a single glance at Chun Shi, yet her words seemed as if she was giving Chun Shi the death sentence. Everyone was shocked when they heard this, and they were very well aware of the weight of Yin Miao Miao's words. It could be said that since she dared to make her stand known like this, then it wouldn't be long before it was realized. For a time, the gazes everyone shot at Chun Shi was filled with emotion. There was admiration, surprise, pity, pleasure from his misfortune, and so on and so forth. Right, in the end, people can't be killed in the martial emperor domain. If we want to resolve something, then the outside world is the best choice. Yin Fenger smiled sweetly as she glanced at Chun Shi as if she was demonstrating her power, and then she held her head high as she turned and left. Yin Miao Miao and Yin Fenger left successively, yet the minds of the people present here couldn't calm down after a long time. Because from today onward, the Yin clan might hesitate at nothing to kill Chun Shi in the real world. Even if his current combat strength was heaven-defying and possessed peerlessly dazzling natural talent, and even if he could be protected beneath the roof of the Liang clan, he was surnamed Chun and not Liang in the end. What sort of attitude would the Liang clan have when facing the Yin clan's rage? Would they protect him at all costs, or would they take him as a pawn that could be discarded after they benefited from him? No one was able to guess the outcome, or perhaps it could be said that they didn't believe Chun Shi would be able to escape calamity at all. Even if he had the protection of the Liang clan, but so long as he was still in Southbridge Continent and within the Yin clan's sphere of influence, then he couldn't avoid mishaps from occurring in the end. Gu Yutong and Luo Zifeng left successively as well. Before they left, both of them frankly told Chun Shi that if he needed anything, they could lend a hand. Chun Shi only nodded towards this but didn't reveal any intention to seek help from them. He'd never thought of asking for their help because it was just as Liang Bing had said. Even if he pierced a hole through the sky, the Liang clan would have no complaints against him, let alone abandon him. So Yin Miao Miao and Yin Fenger's decision was obviously too stupid, idiotic, and laughable to the extreme in Chun Shi's opinion. Thus he naturally wouldn't feel despair or helplessness. Sure enough, it was just as Chun Shi had expected. When he left the martial emperor domain and returned to the outside world, he saw Liang Bing was waiting for him since a long time ago, and the first thing she said to him when she saw him was, "Beautifully done." His voice clearly revealed praise and delight. If Yin Fenger saw this scene, she would surely be angered to the point of spitting blood, and even if Yin Miao Miao were to have seen this, she would probably feel slightly astounded, right? The Yin clan is truly a bunch of bastards. The matter arose because of them, yet they turned around and seemed to intend to kill you instead. They really think they can run wild in the Southbridge Continent. Liang Bing obviously knew about everything that had occurred in the martial emperor domain. She praised Chun Shi for a moment before her gaze turned cold, and her expression became icy cold. Chun Shi just smiled in reply to this and said, "There's no need to worry. Aren't I still alive and well?" Liang Bing frowned and pondered deeply before she said, "Never mind. It's better for you to not go to the martial emperor domain in the near future. For the sake of dealing with you, the Yin clan will probably stop at nothing. It was the God-Killer Needle this time, and we can't know what despicable tricks they'll use next. It would be too late if any mishap occurs." Chun Shi was stunned, and then he said, "There's no need to be so nervous, right?" In his opinion, if it was according to the rules of the martial emperor domain, then no matter what the Yin clan did, they would be unable to do anything to him. What if they don't hesitate to break the rules of the martial emperor domain? Liang Bing said coldly, To the Yin clan, so long as they're able to eliminate you, then even if they have to break the rules, the benefits would outweigh the losses. Not to mention that breaking the rules of the Martial Emperor domain wouldn't end in death, and one would only be expelled from the Martial Emperor domain. She pondered briefly and immediately understood this principle, and he frowned without end. Even the calmest man had a moment of anger. Since the Yin clan had forced him to such a state, how could he possibly not be infuriated in his heart? However, he was clearly aware that he still didn't have the strength to challenge the Yin clan. Otherwise he would have killed his way there and turned it upside down. If he had any other choice, he really didn't want to stop heading to the Martial Emperor domain to temper his strength. Because the battles in the Martial Emperor domain were directly related to the rankings on the Xianxia Immortal rankings, and it was extremely important towards his ability to enter the Tao Emperor Academy. If it wasn't for this, then not to mention the Martial Emperor domain, he wouldn't even be interested in the Ascension Immortal rankings. You're worried that you'll be unable to rise in the rankings? Liang Bing discerned Xianxia's thoughts with a single glance, and she couldn't help but chuckle. What's so difficult about that? Could it be that you think the changes of the Ascension Immortal rankings are only done through battles in the Martial Emperor domain? She was stunned and suddenly came to an understanding, and then he burst into laughter as he felt he'd worried unnecessarily. At the beginning, when he was in the Eastern Peace Continent, he hadn't even entered the Martial Emperor domain, yet his ranking was still at the top 200 of the Continental Ascension rankings of Eastern Peace Continent. This was none other than because he'd proved his strength by killing Xiong Ming. So when he tested himself before the floating wall of light, his name was directly reflected on the Continental Ascension rankings. Simply speaking, the meaning of the existence of the Ascension Immortal rankings was to directly reflect the level of combat strength possessed by an expert. As for the changes in the rankings, no matter if it was in the Martial Emperor domain or the real world, so long as one defeated an opponent that was of a higher ranking before testing one's combat strength at the floating wall of light, one's ranking would undergo a change. However, the only benefit of the Martial Emperor domain was the changes of one's ranking was completely directly on the arena, and one didn't have to be tested at the floating wall of light. Liang Bing said with a smile when she saw she had come to an understanding. You can just stay in my Liang clan for now. Stay in this private room when you intend to cultivate in meditation, and when you desire to spar and temper your strength. I'll arrange for you to battle high-ranked disciples of my Liang clan at the martial practice grounds. As for your rankings on the Continental Ascension rankings, it's only just an extra step of heading to the floating wall of light to test yourself. She felt much more at ease when he heard this. The resources and reserves of the Liang clan was deep, and it wasn't inferior to the Yin clan at all. So there was naturally no lack of outstanding geniuses amongst the disciples of its younger generation. For example, Liang Bing or Liang Ren that he'd only heard of but had never seen, both of them were existences that were ranked at the top 10 of the Continental Ascension rankings, and there was surely no lack of existences ranked in the top 100. With them to spar against and temper his strength while charging up the Ascension Immortal rankings, it had really resolved his most urgent need. Of course, the precondition was that he had to defeat them. But she wasn't worried about this. With the world of stars to rely on and coupled with the dark parasol sapling, how could he possibly be afraid of a fight? After you defeated Yuan, your rankings have risen to the 154th position, and you've even charged into the 9,320th position on the Ascension Immortal rankings. I'll arrange equally matched opponents for you according to your strength. Just tell me when you intend to spar. Liang Bing spoke swiftly, and she seemed to be attentive and meticulous to the extreme. A wisp of warmth couldn't help but surge from Xi's heart when he saw this, and he felt that Liang Bing had helped him too much during this period of time. He wasn't someone with a heart of stone, so how could he not be moved? All right, I won't disturb your cultivation. I have to go see my father and plan about how to deal with the Yin clan's subsequent actions against you. Didn't Yin Miao Miao say that she would stop at nothing to make you lose the protection of my Liang clan? Let me see what they can do. Liang Bing instructed before she intended to leave. She said abruptly, "Wait." Liang Bing's figure stopped momentarily before she turned around and looked at him with a questioning gaze. She thought for a moment and said, "Can you let me see that immortal artifact of yours?" "Yes, the Silver Light Shuttle." Liang Bing was stunned. Yet she still smiled as she flipped her palm before passing over the cosmic-grade immortal artifact that glowed brilliantly with silver light. What? Do you not have an immortal artifact you like? Do you want me to give you one? She shook his head and placed his gaze on the shuttle-shaped immortal artifact that glowed brilliantly with silver light. In next to no time, he noticed that the silverlight shuttle was densely covered with countless fine light violet-colored talisman diagrams, and they were like the traces of the circulation of the stars and seemed mysterious and divine. Sure enough, it's just like the soul-severing mountain smasher in Inauthentic's possession, and they're both immortal artifacts that are like talisman armaments. However, this immortal artifact in Liang Bing's possession is at the cosmic grade. She revealed a wisp of sudden realization. In his opinion, if this silverlight shuttle was refined properly, then its might had much room for improvement. When she saw she seeming to have transformed into an equipment refiner that was scanning it with concentration, Liang Bing couldn't refrain from asking, "How is it?" She said casually, "The Eastern Myrtle Divine Talisman on it is obviously extremely incomplete, and it can only bring forth less than 40% of its might. Moreover, the refinement technique has many errors and omissions that affect the exertion of might." As he spoke, he stared fixedly at the silverlight shuttle, and he was completely unaware that Liang Bing was unable to conceal her shock when she heard these words. She was the owner of the Silverlight Shuttle, so she was naturally clearly aware about everything related to the Silverlight Shuttle. It could be said that the Silverlight Shuttle was a significant reason she was able to be ranked in the top 10 of the Continental Xianxia rankings, and it was her favorite immortal artifact. But she was similarly clearly aware that this immortal artifact's refinement wasn't perfect, and it could only be described as incomplete. Even then, for the sake of refining this treasure all those years ago, the entire Liang clan had paid an extremely great price and exhausted a great deal of effort to allow the Silverlight Shuttle to possess its current might. Even though it was incomplete, its might was amongst the cosmic grade, and it was extremely outstanding. Sometimes, Liang Bing would sigh emotionally that if the Silverlight Shuttle could be perfected a bit more, then her combat strength would probably attain an obvious increase. Unfortunately, she could only dream about this, because the Silverlight Shuttle wasn't an ordinary immortal artifact, and its method of refinement was a type of inheritance that was a secret. Even with the Liang clan's ability, they were merely able to figure out some superficial knowledge. This had also become a regret in Liang Bing's heart that had faded from her memory a long time ago. At this moment, when she pointed out the flaws in the Silverlight Shuttle with a single glance, it instantly caused her to recall everything. After that, she suddenly realized something, and her eyes lit up and even carried a wisp of excitement as she looked at Shi with anticipation before she said, "You can perfect it?" As she spoke, she tried her best to control her voice, yet she couldn't prevent her voice from trembling slightly. This obviously showed how important the Silverlight Shuttle was in her heart. Shi's gaze remained on the Silverlight Shuttle when he heard this, and then he said casually, "It's very simple to perfect. It just has to be refined once more with the correct method." The correct method. A bolt of lightning flashed within Liang Bing's mind when she heard this, and then she suddenly thought of something and said, "Could it be that you know how to refine a talisman armament?" As she spoke, she couldn't conceal the wisp of pleasant surprise and excitement in her voice, and there was even a trace of disbelief. Shi was stunned, and only now did he notice that Liang Bing's mood was slightly unusual. He immediately moved his gaze from the Silverlight Shuttle and said with bewilderment, "Is there anything surprising about that?" When she saw she seeming to be saying, "Of course I know. Is there anything surprising about that?" Liang Bing immediately slapped herself on the head and muttered with vexation, "How could I have forgotten that you're the heir of Oracle Mountain?" At this moment, Liang Bing was like a dazed little girl. Her sexy red lips were slightly slanted while her peerlessly beautiful and icy cold appearance held a trace of vexation, and there wasn't a trace of her queen-like aura. She couldn't help but rub his nose when he saw this. He was truly unable to imagine why she would be so excited just because he possessed the method to refine a talisman armament. As if she'd seen through his thoughts, Liang Bing rolled her eyes and said angrily, "Stop showing off." When she spoke up to hear, she couldn't refrain herself. Can my silverlight shuttles might really be increased? Xianxia nodded. Of course. After she obtained a definite answer, Liang Bing's eyes instantly lit up and were filled with waves as she stared with Xianxia while filled with anticipation. But with my current cultivation, it's very difficult for me to refine a cosmic-grade immortal artifact. Xianxia shrugged and spoke helplessly. Liang Bing was stunned and slightly disappointed, and she couldn't help but bite her moist red lips as she sighed faintly. Is that so? Looks like I was a bit too anxious. But before Xianxia could finish speaking, Liang Bing glared angrily at him and said, Be frank if you have something to say. Stop speaking disjointedly and causing my feelings to rise and fall. You're really too cruel. Her voice carried a wisp of a pouting tone. Coupled with a peerlessly beautiful and sexy appearance and her graceful and hot figure, she emanated shocking charm. Xianxia was stunned by this scene. One was absolutely not a normal man if one remained unaffected when facing such a charming and breathtaking scene of her peerlessly beautiful appearance and sweet breath at such a close distance. Liang Bing seemed to have noticed that this wasn't good as well, and she coughed slightly before her expression returned to normal. Yet she felt a wave of embarrassment in her heart. Damn it! I actually lost my composure. It's all the Silverlight Shuttle's fault. Xianxia recovered his senses as well, and he felt the atmosphere was slightly tricky and said immediately, Even though I'm unable to help you refine it, you can. Liang Bing was astounded and stretched out her hand to point at herself. Me? Xianxia nodded with a smile and said, Wouldn't it be enough for me to pass down the method of refinement to you? Liang Bing's heart trembled, and she said while staring blankly at him, Wouldn't it be bad to do this? Even if she urgently wanted to improve the might of the Silverlight Shuttle, she was very well aware that it was a secret of the Oracle Mountain. Not to mention her Liang clan, even the Gu, Luo, and Yin clans didn't have the slightest qualification to obtain such an inheritance. Their ancestors were at most mere Dao attendants by the side of Oracle Mountain's master, and they weren't personal disciples. So how could they possibly obtain such an inheritance? Xianxia guessed the worries in Liang Bing's heart with a glance, and he could help but smile. I'm only guiding you in equipment refinement and not secretly leaking any technique, so it doesn't matter. Only now did Liang Bing heave a sigh of relief while his entire body felt relaxed. Truthfully speaking, if Xianxia persisted in passing down the method to refine talisman armaments to her, then she wouldn't dare receive it because she was clearly aware that the inheritance of Oracle Mountain wasn't something her Liang clan could encroach on. Xianxia's actions weren't considered as leaking a technique to someone outside the sect, and it helped her solve the problem she had with the Silverlight Shuttle, so it naturally couldn't be any better. Subsequently, Xianxia didn't hesitate to get an empty jade slip and record the method of refining the Silverlight Shuttle within it, and then he passed it to Liang Bing. Liang Bing seemed as if she'd obtained a precious treasure and chatted with Xianxia for a while longer before leaving anxiously, and she seemed impatient as if she wished for nothing more than to refine the Silverlight Shuttle once more overnight. Xianxia was amused, yet really understood Liang Bing's feelings. He didn't waste any more time and directly entered the world of stars before starting to cultivate in meditation while condensing the energy of the laws. Presently, he just advanced into the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm, and it was impossible for his cultivation to improve once more in a short period of time. So, he placed all his thoughts on condensing the energy of the laws. Besides the 5 elements yin and yang, he'd also grasped the grand Daos of wind, lightning, star, eternal, creation, paramitha, oblivion, obliteration, and so on and so forth. Moreover, all of them had been comprehended to perfection. Other people had to first grasp a grand Tao and attain perfection in the grand Tao before they could condense a law, and the process was extremely difficult. After all, not everyone could possess such high comprehension ability. On the other hand, condensing the laws to Xianxia was merely a matter of time, and there was no obstruction standing before him. Presently, he intended to condense the laws of wind and lightning. The Liang clan's main hall was illuminated brightly by lanterns. The Liang clan's patriarch, Liang Tianheng, sat in a leisurely manner at the seat of the host, and he was sipping a cup of tea. Patriarch, Yin Dezhao will arrive in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, a black-robed old man walked in from outside the hall, and he bowed slightly towards Liang Tianheng before he said, According to the information that came from the Yin clan, Yin Dazhao came alone this time and didn't bring anyone with him. Heh. Since old dog Yin sat at the position of the Yin clan's patriarch, his balls have become bigger and bigger. Liang Tianheng chuckled before he waved his hand and said, "You may leave." The old man nodded and was about to leave when he couldn't help but say, "Patriarch, are we really going to spare no cost in protecting Xianxia this time?" Liang Tianheng glanced indifferently at the old man and said unhurriedly, "What? Is there something wrong?" The old man pondered deeply before he said, "Our 4 great clans of the Tao of Talismans, the Liang, Gu, Luo, and Yin clans have existed since the primeval times. Moreover, our ancestors once fought side by side, while following and cultivating by the side of the master of Oracle Mountain, causing us to have deep relationships with each other." He paused for a moment and continued, "Even though the young disciples of the various clans compete with each other and form enmity occasionally, it's only on a small scale. This time, for the sake of Xianxia, the Yin clan has already flown into rage and decided to stop at nothing to eliminate him. If we go against them this time, then we'll probably fall completely into a hostile state with the Yin clan. That's more harmful than beneficial to our Liang clan." Liang Tianheng listened silently to all of this, and then he shook his head in a light-hearted manner after a short moment and said, "So what if we become hostile? Could it be that you think I'm afraid of that old dog, Yin Dazhao?" The black-clothed old man laughed bitterly and said, "Patriarch, you know that I don't mean that. I just can't bear to see our Liang clan's interests being harmed." Liang Tianheng seemed to be lost in thought when he heard this, and then he said, "Do most of the people in our Liang clan think like this as well?" The old man nodded. "They really are." Liang Tianheng couldn't help but shake his head when he heard this, and he was at a loss for how to speak about them. After that, his warm and handsome face was suffused with an arrogant expression as he waved his hand and said, "Then tell them that even if our Liang clan is annihilated, we have to protect Xianxia. If anyone dares to complain, then ask him to come see me." His voice was resolute and decisive, and he seemed extremely domineering. The old man was shocked and finally understood that the patriarch was determined to protect Xianxia, and perhaps there was some sort of secret behind this. Yet he didn't dare to ask any further and left hastily. Not long after the black-clothed old man left, Liang Bing's figure appeared before the hall. She hadn't arrived within the hall, yet her piercingly cold voice had already resounded within the hall, and it carried a trace of happiness. "Father, I found a way to improve the might of the Silverlight shuttle. You must help me." "Oh? Where did you get it? I remember that you found many methods over the years, yet not a single one succeeded. Moreover, there were a few times where the Silverlight shuttle was almost destroyed." The corners of Liang Tianheng's mouth carried a trace of a smile as he teased. Liang Bing blushed before a wisp of pride arose on her peerlessly beautiful face, and she grunted. "It'll absolutely be able to succeed this time," Liang Tianheng roared with laughter. "You said that so many times that calluses have formed on my ears." As he spoke, he raised his teacup and took a light sip before he said, "You've come just at the right time. The Yin clan's patriarch, Yin Dazhao, will be coming over in a moment. Listen to the conditions this old dog raises. As the heir of our Liang clan, not only must you possess a sufficiently formidable strength, you must know to gamble and make choices when faced with benefits." How could Liang Bing have any mood to listen to all of this? When she saw her father seem to not believe her at all, she instantly felt slightly angry. "It's the truth this time." Liang Tianheng was slightly stunned, and he took another sip of tea before he grinned and said, All right. Tell me which ancient sect you got the method from this time. See for yourself." Liang Bing couldn't help but be furious when she saw her father was still teasing her, and she raised her hand and tossed a jade slip over. "You little girl, you really show no respect for your elders. Just for the sake of a treasure." Liang Tianheng raised his hand to receive it and casually scanned through it before his voice stopped abruptly, and his expression became slightly serious as well. "Eh?" After a short moment, Liang Tianheng's expression became extremely serious, and he couldn't be bothered to tease Liang Bing anymore. His gaze was profound, his brows knit together tightly, and he stared fixedly at the jade slip in his hand. "Where did you get this?" After a long time, when Liang Tianheng raised his head once more, his expression carried a wisp of surprise. Liang Bing kept silent instead, and she crossed her hands before her chest while her cherry lips raised up slightly. She seemed as if she was saying, "I knew you would be like this." Liang Tianheng laughed bitterly and said, "Little girl, you're even sulking to your father, huh? Quickly tell me where you go this. If I'm not wrong, it might really be able to improve the might of your Silverlight shuttle." As he finished speaking, his expression had become solemn. The anger in Liang Bing's heart finally reduced greatly when she saw this, and she didn't continue concealing it. "Chun, she gave it to me." Crack! Liang Tianheng's hand trembled, causing the tea cup to fall to the ground and shatter into pieces. However, he couldn't be bothered about this and said with shock, "This wouldn't be related to the Oracle Mountain's technique to refine a talisman armament, right?" His voice didn't carry much happiness, and it was pure shock. "No, I don't have the nerve to encroach on such a technique. This is a method of refinement that Chun she provided for my Silverlight shuttle." Liang Bing immediately explained because she knew her father had misunderstood. Liang Tianheng heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this, and then he said, "Good. We really can't encroach on the Oracle Mountain's technique. In the countless years the immortal dimension has existed, because they coveted the treasures of Oracle Mountain, many powers were." He didn't say what happened to them, yet Liang Bing was clearly aware of the consequences, and she said in a light voice, "I know the consequences. Binger, you've done very well this time. Extremely well. Ha ha ha." Liang Tianheng stared at Liang Bing for a long time before he suddenly started laughing, and his laughter grew louder by the moment and shook the entire hall. Liang Bing was slightly stunned and was slightly unable to guess what her father was thinking. "Brother Tianheng, are you roaring with laughter because something auspicious occurred?" Right at this moment, a low and feminine voice suddenly sounded out from outside the hall, and every single word of this voice was extremely clear yet carried a unique rhythm that caused it to seem like the truths of the Tao were resounding in the hall. At the same time, within a hall in the Luo clan. The Luo clan's patriarch, Luo Dufu, looked at Luo Zifeng with an emotionless expression as he said in a low voice, "I require an explanation." Luo Dufu's figure was bony, his brows sparse, and he was like an extremely ordinary old man. But when he spoke, it carried a domineering aura that didn't conform to his appearance at all. It seemed as if his thin figure contained a volcano and boundless might. Luo Zifeng, who stood below, had a calm expression and seemed to have not noticed the trace of rage that was contained within Luo Dufu's tone. And he grinned as he said, "Father, I feel that I didn't do anything wrong this time because Chun she was worth me doing that." Luo Dufu remained expressionless and looked silently at Luo Zifeng. He really needed an explanation and not whether it was worth or not. After all, a dispute between them and the Ying clan had formed because of a single young man, and it didn't conform to the interests of the Luo clan. Chun Shi's natural talent and combat strength exceed ordinary geniuses, and since I've started cultivating until now, it's the first time I've seen such an extraordinary figure. Luo Zifeng was clearly aware of his father's disposition, and he pondered deeply before he explained. "Of course, I'm well aware that if it was only this, then I can only take him to be a genius that should be won over and made friends with. But when I saw the weapon in his possession, I decided that I had to help him." As he spoke, he raised his hand and executed a profound immortal art, and it condensed a screen that was suffused with jade-white divine mist. Shockingly, a simple immortal sword floated into appearance on it. The immortal sword was pitch black and simple, its blade a meter long, and it was held in a white, slender, and strong palm. It revealed a pose of slashing down in midair, and one could faintly see that the blade of the sword surged with a myriad of dense talisman markings that emanated boundless divine light that was dazzling and resplendent. Luo Dufu's gaze moved to descended on it before sizing it up silently. Luo Zifeng didn't speak any further and waited silently. He knew that with his father's discerning ability, his father would surely be able to notice something. Sure enough, after a short moment, Luo Dufu's gaze suddenly emanated a wisp of dazzling divine radiance, and it was like a scorching sun that suddenly surged into appearance with blazing and awe-inspiring might. A talisman armament. He spoke word by word with a voice that revealed a strand of shock, and it was like muffled thunder that reverberated in the spacious hall. Luo Zifeng was terribly shocked in his heart as well when he heard this. He'd merely suspected it earlier, and he was only 70 or 80% sure that it was a talisman armament. But when he heard his father confirm it, besides feeling relaxed in his heart, a wisp of shock arose in his heart. It turns out that it really is as I guessed. It's real. Yes, it really is a talisman armament. Divine talismans are contained within it and form talisman diagrams. An ordinary immortal artifact can't compare to it at all. Luo Dufu sized it up carefully once more. Unfortunately, it was only a screen condensed from an immortal art in the end, and it wasn't real, so he was unable to discern even more secrets from it. But he was sure that it was absolutely a talisman armament. Could it be that the Liang clan has grasped the method to refine this treasure? Luo Dufu seemed to have thought of something, causing his eyes to narrow while he pondered deeply and muttered. Luo Zifeng knew his father had misunderstood when he heard this, and he said immediately, "Father, that's absolutely not something the Liang clan is capable of refining. Otherwise, Liang Bing would have probably refined her Silverlight shuttle once more." He paused for a moment and continued. "It isn't just the Liang clan. Even our Luo clan and the Gu clan haven't been able to grasp the method to refine a talisman armament." "Oh," Luo Dufu frowned and chuckled. "Could it be that you think this treasure was refined by that young man?" Luo Zifeng said seriously. "Exactly." Luo Dufu's brows knit even more tightly together. Obviously, he felt these words were too absurd, yet he still asked patiently, "What's the reason?" "Father, please take a look." Luo Zifeng withdrew a jade slip and activated it this time, and it revealed numerous scenes. Surprisingly, it was the scenes of the banquet that Liang Bing held a few days ago. In the scene was a tall and handsome young man standing on an arena. He held a talisman brush in hand while casually drawing repeatedly, and then he placed the talisman down. The entire process was no less than 25 breaths of time. After that, the screen from the jade slip flashed once more, and it revealed the miraculous scene of a river of stars filling the sky. The specks of stars densely covered the veil of night, and it was profound, vast, and overflowing with starlight. At this point, the screen from the jade slip vanished. On the other hand, Luo Dufu fell into deep contemplation. He stared blankly and silently, and he didn't return to his senses for a long time. Any talisman formation grandmaster can craft this first talisman of the 7 forbidden talismans. But very few are capable of crafting it within 25 breaths of time, whereas amongst our 4 great clans, there isn't a single person capable of crafting one that reveals the phenomena of a river of stars filling the sky in such a short period of time. Luo Zifeng spoke slowly, and he couldn't conceal his emotion as he said, "But Xianxia accomplished it, and he relied precisely on this to help Liang Bing deal with the provocation of Wu Yifan from the Ice Sky Continent's Wu clan." He paused for a moment and continued, "Father, could it be that you've forgotten that the ancestor of this Wu clan had once been a young Dao attendant at the side of Oracle Mountain's master? In the countless years after, he has always called himself as a branch heir of Oracle Mountain. Moreover, all through these years, the Wu clan has never taken our 4 great clans seriously. Yet now, the Wu clan's most outstanding young talisman formation grandmaster lost at Xianxi's hands." When he spoke up to hear, Luo Zifeng took a deep breath and said, "With all this put together, I feel that even if Xianxi isn't a disciple of Oracle Mountain, he definitely possesses some sort of unknown relationship with Oracle Mountain." Meanwhile, Luo Dufu had awoken from his deep contemplation, and he silently listened to all of this before the gaze he shot at Luo Zifeng changed. It carried a wisp of heartfelt praise as he said, "Meticulous observation and careful thought. Zifeng, you've really grown up." The grown-up he spoke of was naturally a form of commendation and acknowledgement. Luo Zifeng was delighted in his heart because he was aware how difficult it was to receive praise from his father. Since he started cultivating at a young age until now, The amount of times his father had praised him could be counted with his fingers. In this way, the Liang clan is going to prosper with this kid in their possession. Luo Dufu sighed with emotion. With his status and identity, he couldn't help but feel a wisp of envy. When he spoke up to hear, he nodded to Luo Zifeng and changed the topic. You did well this time. Even if you can't win Chun Shi over to our Luo clan, it's sufficient to form some goodwill with him. Luo Zifeng smiled and hurriedly declined modestly. He was aware that with these words, his status as the heir of the Luo clan had strengthened a step further. He Oin clan. That old goat Yin Dazhao is going to the Liang clan tonight to denounce Chun Shi's crimes. I really look forward to the reaction of that ruthless fellow, Liang Tianheng. Luo Dufu seemed to have thought of something and roared with laughter. Luo Zifeng suddenly asked, Father, if the Yin clan infers Chun Shi's value as well, then their attitude towards him will probably change greatly, right? So what if they inferred it? According to what you've said, they've terribly offended that young man. They won't try to save the situation, and they'll only eliminate all future disasters. Luo Dufu said indifferently, If I was Yin Dezhao, I would do the same. After all, no one knows who exactly Chun Shi is and what relationship he has with Oracle Mountain. He'll become a disaster if they don't kill him, and even though they have to bear some risks by killing him, it's the safest path of action. What if Oracle Mountain seeks to punish them? Luo Zifeng couldn't refrain from asking. Since he's already dead, the Yin clan is entirely capable of finding someone to be a scapegoat, and they'll push all the blame on that person to calm the rage of Oracle Mountain. Luo Dufu said casually, Of course, if Chun Shi is a disciple of Oracle Mountain, then there's only one consequence for the Yin clan, annihilation. He spoke casually, yet Luo Zifeng was horrified from hearing it, and he felt even more reverence towards Oracle Mountain. He knew that this name represented one of the most mysterious sects in the 3 dimensions. He merely possessed superficial knowledge about Oracle Mountain's ability, but even that was unable to stop him from feeling reverence towards Oracle Mountain. It was still that same reason. How monstrous was the authority and might possessed by their 4 great clans in the Southbridge continent. But their ancestors were merely Dao attendants at the side of the master of Oracle Mountain. Even though it's like that, I feel that it's impossible for Chun Shi to be a disciple of Oracle Mountain. Since the primordial times until now, I haven't heard of Oracle Mountain ever recruiting a personal disciple. Luo Dufu sighed. Only he was clearly aware that throughout the boundless ages, countless figures with extraordinary natural talent in the immortal dimension desired to join Oracle Mountain, yet none were able to obtain this fortune. It was even to the extent that there was no lack of disciples from the top powers in the 4 great continents amongst these people. Thus, how could that young man who was only at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm possibly be a disciple of Oracle Mountain? If he was a disciple of Oracle Mountain, then how could he possibly appear in Southbridge continent? Luo Dufu didn't tell Luo Zifeng all of this. Just as Luo Zifeng had said earlier, even if Chun Shi wasn't a disciple of Oracle Mountain, since Chun Shi was capable of possessing such attainments in the Tao of Talismans and possessed a true talisman armament, Chun Shi might be deeply related to Oracle Mountain. So he supported Luo Zifeng in winning over and making friends with Chun Shi. At the same time, such a scene occurred in the Gu clan as well. The only difference was the parties to the conversation had become the Gu clan's patriarch, Gu Zhenyu, and Gu Yutong. As the Gu clan's patriarch, Gu Zhenyu had a fiery and decisive disposition. He did everything resolutely and never hesitated. When he heard the news Gu Yutong brought back, he directly decided. You and Yueming will wield the authority of the clan one day. So these things will be decided by the both of you. Right or wrong, it's only training. As soon as he finished speaking, he sent Gu Yutong out, and he didn't pay any attention to the hesitation and helplessness in Gu Yutong's gaze. Little bastard, once you've done some things, then why be fearful and hesitant? You're still too young. Gu Zhenyu shook his head as he sat along in the hall and sighed. After that, he started laughing because he was very pleased with Gu Yutong's actions as well. Moreover, he similarly looked forward to how that fellow, Liang Tianheng, that conceals a knife behind his smile, would deal with Yin Daizhao coming to the Liang clan to denounce Chun Shi's crimes. When he heard the roaring laughter that came from outside the hall, Liang Tianheng instantly withdrew his smile and regained his composed expression. On the other hand, Liang Bing sneered briefly before she sat down solemnly, and she became emotionless, ice-cold, and proud. A wave of steady footsteps resounded outside the hall before a robust, handsome, and poised middle-aged man in a dark violet-colored crane feather cloak walked in. He walked with vigorous strides while holding a smile in the corners of his mouth, and his fierce gaze shot out like a cold bolt of lightning. Every single move he made emanated an oppressive, imposing aura of control and arrogance. He was precisely the patriarch of the Yin clan, Yin Dazhao, a saint immortal realm expert that possessed monstrous authority in the Southbridge continent. After he walked into the hall, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned upon seeing Liang Bing that sat at the side, and then he moved his gaze onto Liang Tianheng that sat at the seat of the host before he roared with laughter. "Brother Liang doesn't mind me coming without an invitation, right?" Even though he spoke like this, Yin Dazhao knew in his heart that since this little girl, Liang Bing, had appeared here, he would probably have to pay a great price to have his wish fulfilled. Because he knew that the young man called Chun, she seemed to have been brought into the Liang clan by Liang Bing. Moreover, she was extremely protective of him. Now that she'd appeared here, it was obvious that she'd heard the news, so she came to stop him from acting against Chun-Shi's interests. But Yin Dazhao wasn't worried. He believed that so long as he paid a sufficient price, he wouldn't have to worry that Liang Tianheng wouldn't agree to his conditions. As for Liang Bing, she was merely a junior and he didn't have to consider her attitude. "Brother Yin, what are you saying? Please have a seat." Liang Tianheng smiled lightly. Yin Dazhao directly sat on a chair at the side, and then he sighed with emotion. "How many years has it been? Since I took the position of patriarch, I've always been held up by affairs of the clan, and I was unable to find a chance to personally pay a visit to Brother Liang. Truly a pity." Liang Tianheng smiled and said, "Then why has Brother Yin found the free time to come to my humble clan now?" Yin Dazhao shook his head. "It isn't free time. I have important business to deal with, but if I'm to succeed in this matter, then I need to rely on Brother Liang." Liang Tianheng said light-heartedly, "Rely? Brother Yin really makes me feel overwhelmed from this sudden favor." Yin Dazhao's expression turned solemn as he said seriously, "Brother Liang, this matter really can't be accomplished without your agreement." Liang Tianheng's expression remained calm. "Oh, then tell me what it is. But let me tell you first that even though I'm the Liang clan's patriarch, I have to consider the feelings of my clansmen before I do some things. If Brother Yin's request is over the top, then even I'll be unable to help. Don't worry, Brother Liang. This matter is like lifting a finger to you." Yin Dazhao said with a smile, yet he cursed in his heart. "You old fox, I knew you would say that." Subsequently, he revealed the reason for his arrival in a concise and comprehensive manner, and he faintly hinted that if the Liang clan could hand Xianxia over, then his Yin clan was willing to pay a certain price that will absolutely satisfy the Liang clan. After engaging in small talk until now, they were finally about to enter the main topic. Liang Tianheng revealed a trace of an interested expression when he heard this, yet he didn't speak about any conditions and seemed to be lost in thought. "Looks like Brother Yin is really diligent in matters related to that little girl, Miao Miao." Miao Miao naturally was Yin Miao Miao. Yin Dazhao knew why Liang Tianheng said this, and he didn't make a modest remark but smiled proudly instead. "Exactly. The Martial Soul Hall's Tai Chuyu personally evaluated Miao Miao as one who possesses the natural endowment to charge into the position of a blazing sun of the new generation. If nothing unexpected happens, then she'll be able to be ranked amongst the 6 great blazing suns within 100 years, and she'll become the 7th blazing sun of the immortal dimension." When he spoke up to hear, he shrugged and said with a helpless expression, "Brother Liang, tell me, can I possibly decline a request from Miao Miao?" Even though he revealed a helpless expression, yet his tone and actions were filled with pride and gratification. This obviously showed how high his opinion of Yin Miao Miao was. The 7th blazing sun. When she heard this, Liang Bing, who was listening silently at the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter. Even though her laughter was extremely soft, Yin Dazhao was a figure at the Saint Immortal realm, so he naturally heard it clearly. but his expression remained unchanged while he remained completely indifferent, and a wisp of a proud and gratified smile still hung on the corners of his mouth. He knew very well that the relationship between Yin Miao Miao and Liang Bing was terrible, so Liang Bing's reaction was within his expectations. How could he possibly be infuriated by this? As the patriarch of the Yin clan, he had at least this much ability to conceal his emotions. Meanwhile, Liang Tianheng said with a smile, "Then I really have to congratulate Brother Yin. Even though that old fellow Tai Chuyu is greedy, his eyes are extremely discerning, and no one in 4 Divinity City can compare with him." Yin Daizhao roared with laughter and waved his hand as he said, "There's no need for any congratulations. Brother Liang's agreement to my earlier request is the best gift to Miao Miao." Liang Tianheng suddenly went silent and just smiled as he looked at Yin Daizhao. When he saw this, Yin Daizhao cursed in his heart. "Old fox, you really won't let out the eagles without seeing the rabbits." He immediately considered his options and said with a smile, "If Brother Liang agrees, then my Yin clan's mine and 2 Grade 1 immortal veins in Green Void Continent will be given to your Liang clan as compensation." Liang Bing was shocked in her herd when she heard this because this was an extraordinary amount of wealth. If she wasn't wrong, then the Yin clan's mine in Green Void Continent contained an enormous mass of the mid-stage immortal material, bright goldhorn iron. It was valued at over 100,000 immortal stones. This was merely one of them, and there were still 2 more Grade 1 immortal veins. If they were combined together, then these conditions were extremely tempting indeed. At the very least, one could establish an ordinary sect. Looks like Old Dog Yin is aware that my Liang clan won't hand Xianxia over without him paying a heavy price. Liang Bing sneered endlessly in her heart. She shot her gaze at her father, Liang Tianheng, yet she saw that he was still smiling while slowly sipping tea in a composed manner, but he just wouldn't speak. Liang Bing couldn't help but smile and feel much more relaxed. Yin Daizhao frowned imperceptibly when he saw this, and he spoke once more. "Brother Liang, my Yin clan will also pay 10 high-stage immortal materials and a bottle of soul-saturate liquid." As he finished speaking, even he felt slightly pained because high-stage immortal materials were precious treasures used to refine cosmic-grade immortal artifacts, and they were rather rare. Of course, it wasn't much to the wealthy Yin clan. The main point was soul-saturate liquid. This liquid was also called Immortal Dew of Wisdom. Consuming a single drop would allow one to obtain miraculous wisdom and greatly increase one's comprehension ability towards the laws of the Grand Tao, and it carried a specially unbelievable effect when utilized while charging into another realm of cultivation. This was the most precious aspect to cultivators. Moreover, the value of this treasure was unimaginable as it could only be chanced upon by luck, and it was almost impossible to obtain no matter how much wealth one possessed. Liang Tianheng was still composed and smiling. It was even to the extent that he bluntly revealed his lack of interest, and he seemed to be in slightly low spirits. This bastard that hides a knife behind his smile. He obviously intends to seize this opportunity and take a fierce bite out of my Yin clan. The corners of Yin Daizhao's mouth couldn't help but twitch fiercely while he gritted his teeth in secret, before declaring his willingness to hand over a few more treasures that were rare and precious. Unfortunately, Liang Tianheng still remained unmoved and the corners of his mouth puckered slightly as if he was dismissing a beggar. Liang Bing was extremely amused in her heart when she saw this, and she forcefully restrained herself from bursting into laughter. It was even to the extent the slightly regretted not bringing Xianxia over to witness this scene in secret. Yin Daizhao's expression was slightly gloomy as he said, "Brother Liang, these treasures are sufficient to display my sincerity. I wonder what other requests you have. Why don't you tell me so that I can consider them?" Liang Tianheng raised the teacup and took a mouthful before he shook his head and sighed. Yet he didn't speak. When Yin Daizhao saw this old fellow seeming as if he held Yin Daizhao within his grasp and continued to remain silent, Yin Daizhao felt rage blaze within his chest, and his expression turned extremely gloomy as well. He went silent for a long time before he gritted his teeth. Slap! He tossed a pitch-black small bottle on the table and said with a low voice, "This is a Heaven Fire Vitality Soul pill. Isn't Liang Bing about to charge into the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm?" After she consumed this pill, It would be sufficient to assist her in overcoming the vitality soul barrier and enter the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. There were 3 barriers in the mysterious immortal realm. The first was the barrier of heavenly mystery that formed a light in one's body. The second was the earth soul barrier that developed the spirit and transformed the soul. And the third was the vitality soul barrier that allowed one to discern the profound. And it was called the barriers of the 3 mysteries. Every single barrier was like defying the heavens and changing one's fate. It was extremely obscure. The Heaven Fire Vitality Soul Pill was capable of helping one charge through the 3rd barrier in the mysterious immortal realm. So this obviously showed how precious it was. Even with the Liang clan's might and wealth, it was difficult to find one of it. And it was a precious immortal pill that could only be chanced upon by luck. Liang Bing felt that there was a moment where she was tempted. Unfortunately, this matter involved Chen Shi, so no matter how tempted she was, she wouldn't change her mind. On the other hand, handing over a Heaven Fire Vitality Soul Pill was already the limit in Yin Dazhao's heart. But to his disappointment, Liang Tianheng remained unmoved even at this moment. Instantly, he couldn't restrain the rage in his heart and said in a low voice, "Brother Liang, could it be that you intend to give me no face for the sake of a young man that isn't related to your Liang clan at all?" Liang Tianheng finally opened his mouth, and he smiled indifferently as he said, "Brother Yin, if I give you face, then who will give me, Liang Tianheng, face? If this matter was to be spread, then my Liang clan would be too incapable for even being unable to protect a young man." Yin Dazhao's expression was extremely gloomy when he heard this. He finally understood that this old goat didn't intend to negotiate with him since the beginning. "Brother Liang, could it be that you've been making fun of me since the beginning?" Yin Dazhao suddenly stood up while his voice carried a questioning tone. He felt that he'd been played, and everything he did earlier was like the actions of a clown. This sort of feeling caused him to be completely infuriated. "I didn't say that. I wouldn't agree even if you handed over that little girl, Miao Miao." Liang Tianheng still maintained a carefree expression. But the meaning behind his words caused Yin Dazhao's expression to turn livid, because this obviously meant that Yin Miao Miao's worth was inferior to Chen Shi. "Very good. Brother Liang, I, Yin Dazhao, will remember everything that happened today. Farewell." Yin Dazhao had fallen into a furious state, and he flicked his sleeve and left. "I won't bother to see you out." Liang Tianheng's indifferent and calm voice resounded by his ears, causing Yin Dazhao's flames of rage to burn even brighter, and he almost gnashed his teeth into pieces. A humiliation. An extreme humiliation. "Liang Tianheng, you bastard. You humiliated me repeatedly for the sake of an outsider? Do you think I'll be helpless against Chen Shi by doing this? From today onward, our clans will break off all relations and be irreconcilable enemies." Yin Dazhao roared in his heart. Since that night, the entire Southbridge continent gradually found out that the Yin clan's patriarch left resentfully, and it was like a stone that caused 1,000 waves and caused a might uproar. What did this mean? It meant that Yin Miao Miao's words weren't fulfilled. In other words, even if it was in the outside world, if the Yin clan wanted to kill Chen Shi, then they had to ask the Liang clan's permission first. Countless people exclaimed with shock and were truly unable to imagine why the Liang clan wouldn't hesitate to offend the Yin clan in order to protect a young man that wasn't related by blood to the Liang clan. Only the Luo clan and Gu clan were faintly aware of what was going on behind the scenes. However, since the Liang clan didn't reveal any information related to Chen Shi, they naturally wouldn't make this unnecessary move, because the fewer people knew about this the better. No matter if it was the Luo clan or the Gu clan, both of them had the same opinion. After all, even if Chen Shi wasn't a disciple of Oracle Mountain, he surely possessed some sort of relationship with Oracle Mountain. Such a secret could absolutely not be made public. Otherwise, would there be any show to see once the Yin clan found out? Exactly. They intended to watch the show, and they eagerly looked forward to the Yin clan offending Chen Shi to the core. Moreover, they could also test Oracle Mountain's attitude towards Chen Shi at the same time. The intentions of the great figures of Southbridge continent couldn't affect the curiosity and discussion of the people towards Chen Shi. It was also because of this incident that Chen Shi's reputation grew greater and greater. Of course, it was mostly reproach towards him. But since that day onward, Xianxia's tracks couldn't be found in the Martial Emperor domain any longer. This caused many people to suspect that Xianxia had no choice but to go into hiding when facing the Yin clan's fury. Xianxia wasn't aware about all these rumors because since that day onward, he'd been in closed-door cultivation within the world of stars while concentratedly condensing the energy of the laws. Time flowed like an arrow, and a month passed in the blink of an eye. Xianxia had been in closed-door cultivation for 5 months within the world of stars. During this period of time, he'd grasped the laws of wind and lightning, causing his combat strength to improve by another level, whereas he was unable to condense the other laws like the laws of star, Paramitha, oblivion, and so on and so forth. He was really unable to condense it, and he was faintly able to sense that this was the limit of the laws a heavenly immortal could grasp. If he wanted to grasp and condense even more laws, then he had to improve his cultivation by a realm. Not the advanced stage of the heavenly immortal realm, not the perfection stage of the heavenly immortal realm, but the mysterious immortal realm. This was a very intriguing feeling. The 5 elements in Yang, Wing, and Lightning were 9 types of Grand Tao laws that just happened to represent the number 9, the extreme of numbers. As it is said, 9 always returns to 1. In a sense, the 9 types of Grand Tao laws Xianxia had grasped were already the extremity. Unless he was able to break through the might of the laws of the heaven Tao in the world, he resided in and charged through the shackles and chains from the heavens and the earth, then perhaps he might be able to grasp limitless Grand Tao laws. But remember, the laws grasped by immortals came from the heaven Tao, so when he broke through the rules of the heaven Tao, it meant that he'd abandoned the heaven Tao as well. This was the meaning of this extremity. It was an extreme that was impossible to overcome. On the other hand, the mysterious immortal realm was a higher level, and it conformed to the saying of 9 returning to 1, and it was a new beginning. All in all, even if Xianxia grasped even more Grand Tao profundities in the heavenly immortal realm, he would merely be able to condense 9 Grand Tao laws. This was a limit that was a rule under the heaven Tao of the immortal dimension. Actually, merely condensing the laws of wind and lightning didn't consume much time, and during these 5 months in the world of stars, he'd spent most of his time tempering his own cultivation. Because he possessed the support of the dark parasol sapling, he'd completely consolidated his cultivation at the intermediate stage of the heavenly immortal realm during this period of hard work, and it had arrived at a full and perfect state. He wasn't far from the advanced stage of the heavenly immortal realm. This was the accomplishments Xianxia had attained during these 5 months. Of course, if it was in the outside world, then only a month had passed. To an expert at the heavenly immortal realm, such accomplishments could be described as a miracle, yet to Xianxia it was extremely ordinary, and it was even to the extent that he was slightly displeased. Because the time of his closed-door cultivation had exceeded the time he had planned. He originally intended to charge into the advanced stage of the heavenly immortal realm, yet he was lacking a final step. Never mind, it's time to temper my combat strength. Compared to the battle with Inauthentic that day, my current combat strength is probably much stronger. I wonder what sort of opponent Liang Bing will give me. Xianxia woke up from his meditation and pondered briefly before he stood up, and then he left the world of stars. When Xianxia walked out of the private room, he saw Liang Bing walking over cheerfully and in high spirits from afar. Coupled with her graceful and slender figure, and her peerlessly beautiful appearance, she emanated an indescribable charm and allure. You've finished your cultivation. So I've come at just the right time. Liang Bing noticed Xianxia from afar and couldn't help but speak with pleasant surprise. Indeed, I was just intending to go look for you. Xianxia smiled. For the sake of tempering your combat strength? Liang Bing sized Xianxia up, and she noticed that Xianxia's cultivation had actually changed slightly after this month of time. The vital energy in his body had become stronger and was restrained and deep like an abyss. If she didn't inspect him carefully, it would be extremely difficult for her to notice these subtle changes. Xianxia nodded. Then come with me. Liang Bing wasn't someone that liked to dally, and she immediately led Xianxia towards the martial practice grounds. On the way, Xianxia asked, "Why did you come looking for me?" My Silverlight shuttle was refined successfully, and its might increased by almost 50%. Liang Bing couldn't restrain the happiness in her heart, and her eyes waved with light that was radiant and enchanting like a lake. Chun, she said to himself, almost 50%? Clearly Cloud have been increased by 60%. Chun, she pondered briefly and came to an understanding. Presumably, the standard of that equipment refiner that helped Liang Bing was slightly weak, and that was the cause of it. If Liang Bing knew Chun Shi's thoughts, she would surely laugh bitterly and feel speechless because the equipment refiner that helped her refine the Silverlight shuttle was her father, Liang Tianheng. The Liang clan's martial training ground was extremely vast, and it was covered in extremely hard chaotic immortal iron. Its surroundings were enveloped in a layer of restriction that were sufficient to obstruct the full-force strike of a golden immortal. At this moment, there were numerous figures moving about on the martial training ground. They were practicing immortal arts and tempering themselves, and it seemed to be extraordinarily bustling. It's the eldest young Mississippi. The eldest young Miss has come. Eldest young Mississippi. When Liang Bing arrived here with Chun Shi, she was instantly welcomed by a wave of small talk, and they looked at Liang Bing with gazes of reverence, while they gazed at Chun Shi with curiosity. Go notify Liang Kuan to head to the number 1 training arena to see me. Liang Bing was accustomed to this behavior a long time ago. She immediately called over a disciple and instructed him before leading Chun Shi through the crowd and heading towards an arena in the distance. That young man is Chun Shi, right? Exactly, it's him. I heard some time ago that the eldest young miss arranged for experts in the clan to spar with Chun Shi. Now it would seem like it really is true. What? There's actually such a thing? Why didn't you say so earlier? Let's quickly head over to the number 1 training arena to watch. Right, let's go over. Big brother Liang Kuan is a first-rate expert in our clan that possesses a cultivation at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm, and he's ranked at the 135th position on the continental Xianxia rankings. On the other hand, Chun Shi isn't much inferior, and it gave rise to much discussion in the martial emperor domain. Supposedly, his current ranking is already at the 154th position, so his battle with big brother Liang Kuan will absolutely be brilliant. Come, let's go. On the martial practice grounds, most of the Liang clan disciples had heard of Chun Shi's reputation. After all, besides Yin Miao Miao, Chun Shi's reputation was the most resounding in Southbridge continent. Moreover, everything he'd done in the martial emperor domain had become everyone's topic of conversation after their meals. At this moment, when they heard that Chun Shi might fight Liang Kuan, how could they restrain themselves? They immediately surged over in unison with the intention of watching the battle. The number 1 training arena. When Chen Shi and Liang Bing arrived here, they saw the surroundings of the arena was filled with people, and all of them had their heads raised while they watched with expressions of anticipation and curiosity. Before long, a young man in black clothes that had a pale countenance and narrow and long eyes walked over, and his arrival caused many Liang clan disciples in the surroundings to be stirred. Obviously, he was Liang Kuan, and based on everyone's reaction, he possessed extremely high prestige amongst the younger generation of the Liang clan. Eldest young Mississippi. Liang Kuan walked over and directly nodded to Liang Bing. This is Chun Shi, your opponent for today. Bring out all your ability and fight with all your strength. Liang Bing introduced in an extremely simple manner. Chun Shi, I know you. Even though this is the real world, I'll fight with all my strength. Liang Kuan turned around and glanced at Chun Shi with a calm and serious expression. That couldn't be any better. Please provide me with your guidance, said Chun Shi with a smile. I'm not worthy of providing guidance. It's only a mere spar. As he spoke, he flew onto the arena, and then his figure rose to stand straight like a spear. His entire figure emanated a fierce and murderous aura that was almost material, and it spread throughout the surroundings and caused the crowd to click their tongues in admiration. Chan Shi didn't hesitate to immediately walk up the arena when he saw this, and he stood in confrontation with Liang Kuan from afar before he raised his hand and said, "Please go ahead." Clang. Liang Kuan withdrew a snow-white one-handed blade, and then he raised it to display his respect. In the next moment, his imposing aura changed once more. The blade in his hand buzzed like a tempestuous wave, and it was suffused with a fierce, murderous, and raging imposing aura. Chun Shi's expression was calm and composed while he nodded to himself in his heart. Merely based on Liang Kuan's imposing aura, Liang Kuan's strength was probably slightly stronger than Yin Wanxuan. Bang! In the next instant, Liang Kuan had slashed down with his blade. The movement of his blade was like a fluttering snowstorm, and it carried a powerful, imposing aura that was ghastly and fierce. It emanated a wave of deafening rumbling as it tore through space. The scene it revealed was like a snowstorm that collapsed a mountain or a great torrent, and it was rather powerful and overbearing. When he saw this, Xianxia withdrew the talisman armament in the end, and he raised it to block horizontally before him. A light swipe of the sword dispersed this move of Liang Kuan's, and Xianxia's movements were extremely relaxed and done with ease. Liang Kuan's narrow and long eyes narrowed while cold lights flashed within them. This probing strike of his allowed him to become clearly aware that Xianxia's strength was really as formidable as the rumors said, and it couldn't be underestimated. At this moment, he truly started to take this opponent before him seriously.